Warm My Muffins 77 Sparkler.
Everyone, how are we doing today? I hope we're all doing very, very well. I am fucking feeling this track. Thank you eternally, Harris Heller, for being amazing. This one is called Skyward. Guys, I'm really excited to share with you guys the channel that we got permission to feature is the word that I was looking for. I do a very bad job of talking and completing a task on the computer at the same time, which means that this is the worst fucking job for me, but I'm gonna keep doing it because I like it. Let's go ahead and stop the music here. Wee, wee, wee. This is the channel that we will be watching today. Finally not true crime. Cool transition, OBS. I don't know why it breaks like that sometimes. It's so annoying. Anyway, hi everyone. It's good to see you all. We are just gonna get right the fuck to work if you guys are okay with that. It's really good to see all of you. It's good to see you guys. I would love it very, very much if you guys would very quickly take a moment and go retweet the stream and try to get your friends in here. It would make me really happy. It would help out. It would help all of us out. Like, basically, the more people that I get watching, the more money that I make. The more money that I make, the better the stream gets to be. So if we can make it so that I am making money and I can, like, invest in the stream, then A pluses all around. Anyway, let's just get to work. I decided that on today's journey through the disturbing on YouTube, we will be watching the Themepark accident related playlist on Fascinating Horror, mostly because that's what Jenny Nicholson would want, and I stan Jenny Nicholson. Lol. Without further ado, here we go.
At 1:51 p.m. on the 2nd of June 2015, at the Alton Towers theme park in the UK, a combination of factors led to a fully loaded car on the Smiler roller coaster crashing into an empty, stationary car at speed. This incident was the worst roller coaster crash in the history of the park and resulted in serious, life-changing injuries for several of the passengers on board. It is down only to good fortune that nobody was killed. The Smiler is a steel roller coaster manufactured by Gerschlauer, which
He's a very nice guy too.
Of Alton Towers in May 2013. The track included a world
Hi,
record
Dee.
beating
How are you?
14 inversions and was themed with several special effects. These included hypnotic spinning discs, sprays of mist, and flashing video screens, all things that, according to the story behind the ride, were designed to manipulate guests into smiling. The ride was initially popular despite a number of setbacks. During a press preview, the ride stalled on a vertical lift hill, requiring celebrities and journalists to be rescued from the train, a process that took several hours.
My cat is here, and he's clumsily trying to crawl over my arm.
To the very end of the month, frustrating many guests who had booked hotel stays specifically to ride the roller coaster. Once the ride had opened, the issues continued. In 2013, along with several incidents of cars stalling on the Batwing element of the track, nearly 50 guests were evacuated from the ride after a bolt fell from one of the joints in the track, causing a very small gap to appear between two track sections. In a separate incident, months later, several plastic guide wheels fell from one of the trains, causing minor injuries to 4 riders. These were, however, minor incidents compared to the one that would take place on a sunny day in June 2015. The roller coaster had been operating normally all morning, despite blustery winds of 46 miles per hour.
Should I leave the cam on him?
Guidelines for the operation of the ride stipulated that it should not be operated in winds of more than 34 miles per hour.
Today.
Indeed, the high winds had resulted in the closure of at least one other ride in the park. Shortly after 1 p.m, a ride operator noticed a warning light indicating a fault with the ride. Riders were removed at the station, the ride was temporarily closed, and engineers were called to the scene.
He's not, he's purring.
Until this point, there had been 4 cars in operation on the ride. Staff had been just about to add a 5th car to the track to help increase rider throughput, a normal thing to do on such a busy day. While engineers worked to resolve the fault, staff added this extra car. After dealing with the original fault, and then another that cropped up right after, engineers were ready to restart the ride. They sent around an empty test car, which failed to complete a loop and stalled on the Cobra Roll section of the ride. This was not known to staff, and due to some confusion about how many cars were on the track, engineers believed that the test car had completed its circuit and the track was clear. The ride was reopened and a car fully loaded with passengers was dispatched. Automatic safety systems halted this train just before the Cobra
Sorry,
roll
baby
section
kitty, you're just
of the
so
ride.
cute. I just gotta snug you.
The system indicated to operators that the track ahead was occupied. One engineer, still under the impression that 4 cars in total were in use, concluded that the stalled car which the ride had detected was down to a glitch. He and his colleague overrode the safety warning and set the fully loaded car moving again. It plummeted down through the loop above which it was held, entered the Cobra roll and smashed at speed into the stalled test car. Passengers on board were left with devastating injuries, the severity of which would be worsened by the length of time it would take to remove them from the ride. It took around 20 minutes for the first call to emergency services to be placed, and around 4 to 5 hours for rescuers to construct a temporary scaffold tower beneath the ride in order to reach the injured parties.
Jesus.
During this time, several of them suffered significant blood loss. All 16 victims survived the crash and were transported to hospital. 2 young women were forced to undergo leg amputations due to the injuries sustained. To their credit, Merlin Attractions Operation Limited, who owned Alton Towers, cooperated fully with the investigation that ensued. From the beginning, they offered their full support to the victims and took responsibility for the accident. A long investigation concluded that it was down primarily
Hi Sunday
to
Crochet,
human
how are
error,
you? It's good to see
but
you.
that adjustments to the ride system would also have prevented the crash.
Hi Dust
Merlin
Shadow
Attractions
Fox.
Operation was given a hefty fine by the Health and Safety Executive. Multiple adjustments were made to the ride system and staff were fully retrained. With these changes complete, the Smiler roller coaster reopened less than a year after the crash in a move that garnered some severe negative press for the park. It has, however, gone on to have a clean safety record since, and is now a popular ride within Alton Towers. If you visit the park,
I would
you
ride
can
it.
even
I'm not
ride it
gonna
yourself.
lie. Something that's designed to make
The
you
Smiler
smile. I
will
think
run
that's just
for many
cool.
more years. The park itself will continue to welcome guests, but for the victims of the Smiler roller coaster accident, life will never again be the same.
I can imagine. This is why I don't ride big coasters, only small ones that have one cart at a time and you can see the track. Yeah, I ride any and all. Any and all
On the
thrill
evening
rides
of
that
the
I can
14th
get
of
my
June,
paws on.
1986,
That I
the
can get my
Mindbender
keister
roller
in.
coaster at the Fantasyland amusement park within the West Edmonton Mall in Canada suffered a severe malfunction. Several bolts came loose from a wheel assembly on one of the cars, causing it to leave the track and collide with a concrete pillar, ultimately resulting in the deaths of 3 of the riders and severe injuries to 1 other. The Mindbender at Fantasyland, a theme park which is now known as Galaxyland, was the largest indoor triple looping roller coaster in the world. Having officially
Isn't a
opened
triple
only
loop
a few
really
months earlier,
dangerous? Or
in
like, I
March
guess
of
if it's not right in a
1986,
row.
it was a popular attraction, ridden by hundreds of patrons each day. The ride lasted just under 90 seconds and featured multiple inversions, helixes, and close encounters with pillars, supports, and other scenery. On the day of the accident, maintenance crews had temporarily closed the roller coaster after hearing a metallic rattling sound. They conducted several test runs without passengers
Sorry, it's
on
really
board
hard to get used
in
to
order to try
using
and
these
diagnose
stitch
this
markers
problem, but could find nothing
with
amiss.
these nails.
They
Thanks,
decided to
babe. I'm so
reopen the
sorry.
ride
You're the
and
best.
sent around a train filled to capacity
Oh, are you mad?
with 16
Okay.
passengers. The ride
I know,
functioned
he's so
as normal
cute.
until they approached to the final loop. It was at this point that a faulty wheel assembly on the final car in the 4-car train gave out, and the car came loose from the track. Now, no longer attached to the roller coaster rails, this final car was held on only by its coupling to the car in front. It fishtailed wildly, shearing off most of the undercarriage in the process. The damage to the car caused the lap bar restraints to release, and the 4 riders in the car were thrown to the concrete floor below. The coaster continued along the track, but due to drag from the damaged car, was unable to complete the final loop. It stalled and rolled backwards, causing the damaged car to slam into a concrete support pillar, finally halting the damaged train. Passengers remaining on board the train were left suspended midway up the loop for almost half an hour before an effective rescue could be completed. The 4 passengers thrown from the damaged car included Tony Mandrusiak and Cindy Sims, an engaged couple, along with their friends Rod Chaco and David Sager. Rod Chaco was the only one of the 4 who survived the crash. He sustained multiple traumatic injuries, including a punctured lung, broken ribs, broken legs, and other multiple fractures.
That's so sad and scary.
Following the accident, the ride was closed and thoroughly inspected. It was determined that the cause of the accident was a combination of a design flaw by manufacturer Anton Schwarzkopf and a lack of proper maintenance and inspection.
Hi Leslie, so good to see you. How are you?
The roller coaster was completely refitted. The number of cars in each train was reduced, redundant safety harnesses were added, and an anti-rollback mechanism was fitted. The ride was made easier to inspect, and a rigorous program of maintenance was put in place. The ride continues to operate to this day, with a perfect safety record from 1987 onwards.
Hey, you never know.
Rod Chaco suffered from an addiction to painkillers for more than a decade, but eventually conquered this and went on to live a full life. He has made frequent requests to West Edmonton Mall to erect a small plaque or a bench in remembrance of the victims of the crash.
I think that's reasonable.
Has consistently refused this request, not wishing to remind patrons of the fatal accident which haunted the first year of the Mindbenders operation.
Capitalism, baby!
At about 3:30 p.m. on the 2nd of June, 1997...
Do you like these little short stories, guys? Are you into this? Do you like this channel so far?
We're visiting Waterworld USA in Concord.
Hi, Henry.
They decided to enact
I'm hanging in there, Leslie. I only saw How Are You? Let me go back and look at your message.
With as many students as possible. It was a
finally got medicine refill. I love to hear it.
With no adverse consequences. This year, however, it would prove to be fatal.
Happy to hear that you're feeling
better. The tradition
better.
had been started many years before, when the annual end-of-year trip for seniors from Napa High School was to Manteca Water
I'm
Slides,
not sewing, I'm crocheting.
Water park, where many of the slides were built into the side of a hill. Students had routinely clogged the water slides
the sewing machine could not do what
incident.
I do.
The water slides at Waterworld USA were, by contrast, elevated on tool supports and were intended to be ridden by a single rider at a time. At maximum, they were known to be able to bear the weight of no more than 10 people at once.
4, 5, 6. Okay.
The prank was carried out at the end of the day, as students were aware that they might be kicked out of the park as a result. As the end of their visit approached, dozens of students made their way to the Banzai Pipeline, one of the tallest slides in the park, which began from the peak of a 40-meter tower. They rushed the slide,
the machine couldn't forget where they are. That's
who desperately tried to prevent them
Hi,
from
Seneca, how are you?
Masse. Halfway down the slide, the first few riders pressed their hands against the edges of the chute and halted.
Never watched someone knit before. I'm crocheting, bud.
Behind them. It was.
Can you do it with your eyes closed? I can actually. These single crochets, I can 100% do without looking.
Together for years.
I prefer to look.
They were ecstatic
but
to be taking part in one final
I do this while I'm watching TV and stuff a lot.
When the fiberglass chute cracked and broke, there were more than 30 people on the slide, with bodies piled up almost all the way to the platform at the top of the tower. In seconds, the slide gave way, sending dozens of students tumbling as much as 20 meters to the ground below. Students on the slide later reported that some,
avenging pineapple, or are you just kind of an odd duck? Because I'm okay with that.
In a panic before they could fool themselves. The ground below was instantly littered with bodies.
I feel like your questions are odd too. I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that you're pretty offbeat, and I think that that's fun.
Were on the scene within minutes, but were overwhelmed by the number of casualties. It took hours to transport some of the injured
I hope it
to
doesn't
local
hurt your
hospitals
feelings.
for treatment. In total, 32
tried to buy some
young
crochet
people were
supplies,
hurt,
but I think I accidentally bought
in
knitting yarn
life-changing
instead.
ways.
A lot of the time they can be
18-year-old girl,
interchangeable. I hope it works
Bilotti,
out for you.
died from her injuries not long after arriving at hospital. In the aftermath of the accident, and despite the fact that the slide was found to be safe under normal operational load, A total of $4 million was paid in settlement
Hi,
by
Clara.
Waterworld
How are you?
USA
Is it Clara or
and the designer
Clara?
of the slide. The park changed hands several times.
Does
over
it
the
rhyme
years
with
that followed the
Mara
accident,
or
but
Sarah?
remains open for business to this day. The Banzai Pipeline was, after thorough investigation, rebuilt, reinforced, and reopened. Despite the tragedy,
I think that both of you are just fine, Moth and Pineapple. I think that Moth is just looking out for me, and Pineapple is being a delightful little weirdo, and I'm into it. I like it. Clara? You like Clara better? Okay.
Albeit in many cases with chronic pain as a result of the injuries sustained in their youth.
Okay, we don't have to get hostile. There's nothing, nobody did anything wrong here. We're all okay. Everything's great. Okay, 1, 2.
At around 4:45 p.m. on the 21st of June 2007, a component on the Superman Tower of Power drop ride at Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom broke under stress, resulting in the accidental amputation of a 13-year-old girl's feet.
5.
This bizarre
That's how it's
accident
pronounced. You're the
unfolded
first
in a
person I
matter
know
of
who has
seconds
ever pronounced it
and is
the
one
right
of
way
the most
first.
gruesome in the history of theme park ride
I feel
accidents.
like, I don't know, I
The
could
Superman
just
Tower
feel
of
it
Power
coming off of
is
you,
a
I
relatively
guess.
standard drop ride installed at several Six
I don't know.
Flags parks around the
It
United
just felt
States.
right. I'm glad.
The model at
I'm glad
Kentucky
that we got
Kingdom
it right.
opened in 1995 and consisted of a single 50-meter tower onto which was mounted a single car with seats facing outwards. Riders were strapped into these seats and the car would then be lifted to the top of the tower, held for a moment and dropped straight down to be caught by magnetic brakes just 7 meters from the ground. 13-year-old Caitlin Lassiter was enjoying a day out at the park with friends when the incident took place.
This is so scary.
She and her friends had already enjoyed the ride once and opted
Look
for a
at how
second
upset
turn.
she is. I hate it. It's so
The decision
sad.
would have terrible consequences for her. The ride began as normal, but during the ascent to the top of the tower, a cable sheared and fell down to entangle Caitlin and her friends. Riders screamed for the ride to be stopped, while Caitlin worked frantically to disentangle herself. She successfully managed to remove the cable from around her neck, but was unable to dislodge it from around her ankles.
Thank goodness she was able to get
The
it
ride operator
away
at
from
ground
her
level
neck.
noted unusual screaming from the ride. She telephoned the park emergency number, but when she explained the situation, the emergency responder misunderstood and told her that it was normal for riders to scream. At some point, the emergency stop button for the ride was pressed, but this was either ineffective or done too late. The ride paused at the top of the tower and then dropped as normal. As it fell, the cable around Caitlin's legs tightened and chopped off both feet at the ankles.
That is...
Her shoes,
Can you
with her feet
imagine?
still inside, fell into the catch net under the ride. When the ride car returned to ground level, riders found the harnesses locked. This was a result of the emergency stop having been activated and could not be undone except
Really
by a
has the
technician in an
whole...
adjacent building. It took 10 minutes to release the riders, including the maimed Caitlin Lassiter. She was rushed to hospital, and after extensive surgery, one of her feet was successfully reattached. Doctors could not save the other, and Caitlin was eventually fitted with a prosthetic. After a long recovery period, she was able to walk again. The Superman Tower of Power ride was instantly closed and thoroughly examined. It was found that the manual governing the routine inspection procedures for the ride was out of date. The newest edition of the manual contained procedures for inspecting and testing the cable that would have prevented it from deteriorating to the point where it could break. The delay in the ride operator hitting the emergency stop was also cited as a contributing factor.
I refuse to do free falls. I was convinced to do one once and almost passed out. Oh god, I think they're so fun.
Demolished. Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom was given a fine of $1,000 for failing to maintain the ride.
That's it? Little girl lost her feet and they got fined. I also love park rides. I love theme parks. I love them. I actually, like, I do love thrill rides. I think they're so fun, but I really...
was enjoying a
really enjoy like boring rides too.
Kansas.
Like just the easy like
Verrückt water slide, one of the
I don't know. I just like theme parks, man.
Became airborne and collided with safety netting, killing him instantly.
Besides roller coasters, I'm scared shitless of heights. I'm scared of heights too, but for some reason on roller coasters it's fun, scary, and not like get me the fuck out of here scary. You know what I mean?
Unsafe and should never have been allowed to operate in the first place. Verrückt was the brainchild of Jeff Henry, Schlitterbahn's co-owner, who announced his intention to build the world's fastest water slide during an interview at a trade show. Having made this pledge,
I have done both, and they are
he then attempted
so
to
fun.
pitch the ride
They're
to several
so
manufacturers,
fun.
but was unable to
I
find
love
anyone willing to
slingshots in
take on its
particular.
construction. Undaunted, Jeff Henry decided that he would oversee the design.
Okay,
and
clarification.
construction of
It
the
is
ride
kind of ridiculous
himself.
that the fine was only $1,000, but that was just a fine. The family
Verrückt
settled
was
with Six
comprised
Flags
of
out of
2
court for an
drops.
undisclosed
An
amount.
initial
Okay, that makes me
17-story
feel better,
plunge was followed
but I
by a
still think
short
that they
uphill
should
section,
be
which carried riders
fined.
to the top
I
of
feel
a
like
second-long drop. Riders would have to climb
I
more
feel
than
like
200
in
steps to
capitalism,
the
the
top of
only
tower
punishments for
before sliding down
corporations
on
are
board specially built
big fines that
3-person
they're going to
rafts.
feel. You know what I
During
mean?
testing,
Then again,
sandbags were mounted onto these rafts
if
and
it
sent
means
down
that
the
the
slide.
victim gets more,
On
then
several
I'm
occasions,
for
it
the
was noted
model
that
that
they
we
became
use,
airborne
I
at the
suppose.
end of the
I
uphill
don't know
section,
enough about it.
sometimes
I
smashing
feel
into
like
safety
I'm
netting that had been
really
added there.
zoomed in today.
To mitigate this danger, the entire bottom half of the ride was demolished and rebuilt at a shallower angle, and a weight limit was set for groups of riders to ensure that they did not gather too much momentum during the first drop. Jeff Henry was not a professional ride designer or engineer. Anxious to get the slide open for the park's 2014 season, he pushed the designers he did hire.
Thank you for the
to work around
clarification,
the clock,
though, Sperry. That was
rushing
something that I wasn't
calculations
even
and
really
tests that
keeping in
should have
mind.
taken months. The media were unaware of this and unaware of the failed safety tests. Thanks to an earlier decision to allow Schlitterbahn to self-inspect its own rides rather than enforcing state inspection, the state of Missouri also never realized the ride was unsafe.
Fines need to be
Indeed,
large enough that
when
it's
Verrückt
not cheaper to
opened,
pay the
it attracted
fine than
national media
refit.
coverage and was named the world's best new water park ride at the 2014
I don't know if I
Golden Ticket
follow.
Awards.
I imagine I
Over
agree
the
with you,
course of
though,
the next
because I
year,
agree with like
at least
all of your
13
takes.
riders suffered injuries on Verrückt, usually as a result of their rafts becoming airborne and smashing into
I
the
wouldn't be
safety
surprised
netting
if we
that covered the
disagreed on
slide.
some stuff. Like McDonald's with the hot coffee, it was
Supervisors and
cheaper to just
officials
pay
were
off
quick to
people to
hush
be
up the
quiet than to
injuries,
change their
wanting
coffee
to protect
policies.
the investment
Gotcha,
of the
okay.
park.
Yeah, I follow now.
They paid off the injured
Yeah, I agree
and
with you.
ignored mounting safety concerns amongst the ride's staff and lifeguards. The accident which killed Caleb Schwab was inevitable. It was avoidable. It was tragic. When the raft on which he was riding became airborne, he struck his head on one of the metal supports that held the safety netting in place over the slide, killing him instantly and throwing him from the raft. The 2 women riding with him also sustained serious injuries, but survived. Caleb Schwab's remains followed the raft down the final portion of the ride, leaving behind them a trail of
I've
blood.
seen the pictures.
In
I've seen the
aftermath of
pictures.
accident, the water slide
know.
was closed permanently,
Yeah.
and the decision to allow
Watched
Schlitterbahn
there
to
was like a
self-inspect its own rides
documentary
was swiftly revoked.
about that
Engineers inspected the ride
and
before it was
how
demolished, and
McDonald's
noted that it
paid
was
a lot of
non-compliant in
people
multiple
to
ways with
like
basic safety regulations.
basically
Jeff
go
Henry
loud and proud
two other
with,
co-owners and
oh,
designers
this is a
were arrested and
frivolous
charged with
lawsuit or
involuntary
whatever to like
manslaughter,
try to
but the
discredit this
charges
poor
were
old
eventually
lady that
dismissed
like
after
was in
inadmissible
incredible
evidence
amounts
was
of
used in
pain,
court.
had bone
Schlitterbahn,
damage from the
Kansas continues
burns.
to operate to this
Like
day,
there was a
although
lot.
Verrückt has since been torn down. There is no memorial on site to 10-year-old Caleb Schwab.
Hi, Oz. Cabbage is back. All right, see you later, Leslie. Have a good one. Thanks for hanging out. It's good to see you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
At around 10:15 p.m. on the 9th of June, 1979, a fire broke out on the ghost train at Luna Park in Sydney, Australia.
Yeah, and they refused at first.
The fire would ultimately claim 7 lives, wiping out almost an entire family in the process. It was a devastating blaze, the true cause of which remains, to this day, unknown. The ride itself was fairly old at the time of the disaster. It started life in 1931 as a dark ride at Luna Park, Glenelg.
I love dark rides.
At the time, rides of this type were known as pretzel rides, so called because the track twisted and turned extremely tightly within the confines of the ride building. It wasn't until 1937 that the attraction was given a ghostly makeover and reopened as the Ghost Ride. Metal
That
cars
looks scary.
seated 2 riders each, and after being pushed from the station by a ride attendant, followed the preset track through a series of darkened rooms filled with spooky animatronics, creepy music, and special effects. While the interior of the ride had been rethemed and revised constantly over the years, the track layout had remained unchanged since 1936. The ride was still as twisting, turning, and confusing as it had been back when it was a pretzel dark ride. Unfortunately, the fire suppression systems which had been retrofitted into the ancient ride were also somewhat out of date and dismally insufficient to smother the blaze that began on that fateful evening in 1979. There were approximately 35 people on board when the fire began. The first indication staff had that something was amiss was when smoke began pouring from the entrance and exit tunnels of the ride. Rather than
that
stop
feels
the
like a
ride
pretty
and try
big
to
red
evacuate
flag.
guests through the complicated and confusing interior corridors,
You can tell the
they left it
difference
running,
between smoke and
instead
steam.
focused their energies on getting guests out of their cars and away from the ride as soon as they emerged from the tunnel. The fire service attended, but by the time they arrived, the fire had already taken hold. Their efforts to extinguish
Cake is
it
better
were
than
further
pie, in
hampered
my
by low
opinion,
water pressure within the park,
but cobbler is
leading
better
them
than
to eventually
cakes.
draw water from the harbour to fight the flames.
Don't know if I agree.
Within
Hi,
an hour,
Delarge. How are
the
you?
entire ride building was consumed, collapsing into a pile of twisted wreckage. It was thought initially that all riders had been evacuated safely, but at around 11:30 p.m, 7 bodies were discovered. They were so badly burned that investigators at first assumed them to be animatronics from the ride's theming. The bodies included those of a father and his 2 children.
No.
John Godson had been visiting Luna Park with his wife and kids.
Yes, I am.
The ghost train was their final ride of the day, and one that his wife declined to join them on. Instead of riding the ghost train, she went to get an ice cream and agreed to meet them at the exit of the ride.
Hold on, I have to bring this close to my face again. I'm so sorry.
But left her as the only surviving member of her family. The other victims were 4 schoolchildren from nearby Waverley Boys College.
There.
Jonathan Billings, Richard Carroll, Michael Johnson,
I just never
and Seamus Rahley, all just 12 or 13 years old at the time. It is speculated that, when the fire broke out, the 7 victims left their cars and attempted to escape the building on foot. In the dark, confined, smoke-filled passageways of the ghost train, they lost their way and succumbed to the smoke. Although we cannot be certain, there is a chance that had they remained within their cars, they may have survived the blaze.
That's so sad.
The cause of the fire itself was never established, although in later years, Abe Saffron, a notorious member of the Sydney underworld, was linked to the fire. His niece told authorities that he had started the fire as part of a plot to take control of Luna Park's
I don't know if that would be
lease,
any more
although
comfortable.
He had never intended for anyone to die. Abe Saffron, of course, denied all involvement, and nothing was ever proven. The victims of the fire are now memorialised by a small plaque on the external wall of the Big Top Arena, which stands on the one-time site of the ghost train. Luna Park continues to operate as ever it did, visited by millions each year.
Is that the one that's part of Coney Island or whatever? I watched Defunctland's Coney Island, like, mega doc.
At around 2 p.m. on the 28th of June 2008,
he did a mega doc on
a 17-year-old boy on a trip to the Six
Jim
Flags
Henson
over
2 that was
Georgia theme
fucking
park
phenomenal.
Made a fatal mistake.
I'm happy as fuck
For
that I
reasons
watched
unknown, he scaled 2 fences and entered a restricted ride area, and was subsequently decapitated by a passing train.
Oh, I've seen
The
this
horrific
exact
incident
video
made news
before,
nationwide,
but that's okay.
but it was not the first to occur on that same roller coaster. Batman, the ride, is a steel inverted coaster replicated at several Six Flags parks across America. Manufactured by Bolliger and Mabillard, it consists of a steel track around 820 metres, 2,700 foot, in length. At the time, it was the world's first inverted roller coaster,
before we
a
mark
name
it.
given because
And also,
trains
we're not doing
dangled from the
single
track
crochets
rather
this
than
time
running
around.
on
Now
top
we're
of
doing
it.
the shells.
Riders were secured
My
with
bad.
over-the-shoulder harnesses and completed the ride with their legs dangling over the void. Initially, there was just one version of Batman the Ride, operating at Six Flags Great America in Illinois. Once the concept proved to be successful, however, management were quick to approve clones of the ride for 6 other Six Flags parks across the country. The clone at Six
Isn't
Flags
it called
over
Six
Georgia
Flags because
opened
there's
in
6 of them?
1997, making it just over 10 years old by the summer of 2008. That was the summer that Isaiah LaShawn Ferguson and his parents came to the park as part of a trip.
Should look up
organised
Disney
by
ride
their
things,
local church
yo.
group.
I know
At around
about
2 p.m.,
about
Ferguson
Disney ride
and
stuff.
another boy
I've
entered
never
the
been to
restricted
Disney.
area
I
underneath
really
Batman the
want
Ride.
to. I really want to.
There are
I'm
conflicting reports about why
fucking
they did so.
36 and I've never
Some
been to
witnesses
Disney.
claim that Ferguson lost a hat while riding the coaster and was trying to retrieve it. Others claimed that he wanted to touch the ride or grab the foot of one of the riders as they went by overhead. Still others speculated that the pair were taking a shortcut to the entrance of the ride in order to beat the queues. While the reason that the two boys entered the restricted area
Texas
is
had flown
unknown,
6 different
what they
countries'
had to
flags,
do to get
including
there
the US
is a
flag.
matter
Okay,
of widely
interesting.
publicised fact. The dangerous area
We
beneath
are,
the roller coaster
Catalan.
was protected by 2 6-foot fences, which the boys scaled one after the other, ignoring multiple highly visible warning signs in the process. Once inside the ride area, the boys made their way to a spot directly under the ride track at the bottom of a drop. It was here that Ferguson was hit. The train was travelling at its top speed of 80 km per hour, or 50 miles per hour, when the incident occurred. A rider's dangling foot connected with Ferguson's head, and at this speed, the impact was significant enough to completely decapitate him, killing him instantly.
At least it was instant.
The other boy who had accompanied Ferguson into the restricted area was uninjured. Somewhat miraculously, so too was the rider whose leg had been involved in the collision.
When Six Flags
In the
over
immediate
Texas opened
aftermath
in
of the accident,
1961,
the ride was closed while an
fuck's sake.
investigation was completed. It was during this time that it emerged that Ferguson was not the first person
there
to
were 6
die
themed
in this
areas
manner.
within the park. Each area was themed after one
In
of the
May
6 countries whose
2002,
flag was flown
a
over Texas
58-year-old
during
groundskeeper
the
named
state's colorful
Samuel
history.
Milton
Okay.
Guyton was
Interesting.
killed while in the same restricted
That's
area.
cool. I had no
again
idea.
by an impact from the dangling leg of one of the ride's passengers. On both occasions, the ride was closed for little longer than a single day, just long enough for the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration to inspect the ride and deem it safe for passengers. On both occasions, it was ultimately unknown why the victim ended up where they were. On both occasions, the incident was caused by the same mechanism, and yet no changes were made in the aftermath of either death.
Well, what are they supposed to fucking
The
do?
clone of Batman the
Like,
Ride
they
at
have
Six Flags over
signs
Georgia
out.
still operates to this day. There is no memorial on site to either of its victims.
Sometimes the gene pool cleanses itself, you know? Like, not to say that I don't feel bad for those victims, but, like, there are signs, man. I mean, if you had to scale 2 6-foot fences plastered with "you will die" sign, exactly. Like, it's a death wish at that point. Fucking, yeah. Shit's dangerous. I think that we're all in agreement. I felt like a terrible person saying it at first, and then I was just like, no.
2016,
and then you guys agreed
at the
with
Dream
me.
World theme park in Australia.
So I feel
a
good.
river
I feel pretty
rapids
good
ride
right about now. I feel
malfunctioned.
pretty good right about now.
The failure of a water pump precipitated a deadly accident that claimed 4 lives in a matter of moments. An accident which, later investigation would reveal, could have been prevented.
All right, I fucking
Dreamworld
let go
was
of
open
the
in
projects that I could
1981
fucking
with
take
a
this
modest
stitch
collection of
marker
attractions.
off, but that's fine.
These included an IMAX theatre, a model train, a
I'll
log
move it.
flume, and a
No, let's
vintage
just move
car
it now.
ride. Over the decades that followed, the park grew steadily, acquiring several roller coasters, a wildlife park, and numerous other rides. Sections of the park were developed with different themes in mind. The DreamWorks Experience Zone, for example, featured several
I
attractions
was
that
sure
tied in
you'd
with popular
disagree with my
DreamWorks
opinion.
films, such as Kung Fu Panda and Madagascar. The Town of Gold Rush zone was themed after the Australian gold rushes of the 1800s.
Ample warning, it
the
is
Thunder
your
River
fault
Rapids
if
ride
you do something
was one
reckless.
of the main attractions situated there when the zone opened in 1986. The basic design of the ride might be familiar to any theme park enthusiast, as it resembles hundreds of other river rapids rides around the world. Many rides of this type in other parks are designed and built by Intamin, a well-known and reputable ride design and manufacturing company. The River Rapids ride at Dreamworld, however, was custom built by the park itself.
I love the Rapids
Riders
ride
at Dreamworld would
the
board
Iowa,
circular 6-person rafts
the big
from a
Iowa
constantly
amusement
rotating
park
station platform,
Adventureland. It's
which
called,
allowed
I think it's
easy
called
boarding
Ragin'
without
Rapids,
boats
and it's
having to
very
come
fun.
to a complete stop. Once dispatched, each raft would travel at a modest pace
There was
along
also
a
a
watercourse
G-Force
that
ride
included
called
a tunnel
Silly
several
Silo, but I think
sections
it
of
got
simulated
removed, which is
whitewater
sad. It was one of my
rapids.
favorites. I love G-Force rides.
Boats were bumped, jostled, and splashed unpredictably as they moved along a curving channel. Part of the fun of the ride arose from the fact that some riders would inevitably get wetter than others. The course of the ride was on a gentle downward gradient. This was what caused the water within the channel to flow, thus conveying the boats along without the need for an onboard propulsion system. Naturally, this meant that, by the end of the ride, rafts would need to be lifted back up to the station before they could be sent around again. At Dreamworld, this was achieved by means of a conveyor belt.
Like and Biker, thank you so much.
Boats were
I
guided
appreciate
onto
you
it
very much.
and carried upwards
69
with
Sparkler,
guests
9
still
months
on
being
board.
subbed to the beautiful goddess of Garbo
When it
AMD
reached the
Twitch
top
baby.
and
Twitch
returned to
baby.
the
I have
station,
ideas for names.
guests would
Well,
dust
let's
the
hear 'em.
Slide,
back
Doxy
onto the
Fart, Slide,
rotating
Doxy
station
Fart,
platform.
Slide, Doxy Love, Doxy Love.
You know
Just
what?
as the
Doxy
rafts
Fart Slide,
needed to
Doxy
be
Fart
lifted
Slide,
back
Doxy
up
Fart
at the
Slide,
end of the
Doxy Love,
circuit,
Doxy Love is
so
such a good
too
name.
did the
I think we
water.
should just go with that.
Something normally achieved by two powerful
Let's go on
water
some G-Force
pumps.
rides together, Doxy. Absolutely. Let's go.
On the 25th of October 2016, one of these pumps failed, which caused the water level in the ride to drop significantly. This resulted in a raft which had just reached the top of the conveyor belt becoming stranded on support rails. There wasn't enough water in the channel to carry it onwards, and so it was stuck just short of the ride station. The conveyor belt, however, continued to move, carrying up another raft. This raft, holding 6 guests, collided with Raft 1, causing both to pivot upwards. Raft 1 fell back into a horizontal position, while the continued movement of the conveyor belt forced Raft 2 into a vertical position.
Scary and awful.
4 of the occupants of Raft 2 were thrown out and onto the conveyor belt. The conveyor belt was, at this stage, still moving. The victims were either dragged beneath the stranded raft and crushed, or fell through the gaps in the belt and became trapped in the machinery beneath.
That's awful.
All 4 of them were killed. There were 2 survivors from Raft 2, both children. They were able to cling onto the raft even in its vertical position, and later clamber to safety once the conveyor belt had stopped.
For a girl Gwen and for a boy Arthur?
The ride was evacuated,
I can
and the
accept
park
that.
closed as a recovery operation took place. Even once all the water had been drained from the ride, it took until the next morning to retrieve the bodies. The process of doing so was so traumatic that some of the paramedics involved required counselling once it was complete. The park remained closed
I hope they made
for a month,
very
both
sure
out
that
of
those people were
respect for the
dead
dead
before they left
and
them
to allow an
overnight.
investigation to be completed. The results of this investigation would take several years to emerge, but when they did, they were damning. There had been a litany of failures on the part of the park.
Yeah, don't ever ride a ride. Y'all,
Rudimentary safety
never
features
ride
had not been
temporary rides.
implemented on the
Never
ride,
ride rides at
even though they
carnivals
would
that
have
are
been
just
extremely
coming through
inexpensive.
town. Never. always that
There
is
was
the
no
most
automatic
dangerous.
water level indicator,
Amethyst
for
Scales,
example.
hello, welcome. How are you?
No
Everybody make sure
holistic
that
risk
Amethyst
assessment
Scales
had been
feels
completed,
welcome.
And the task of identifying
Join me in
risks
welcoming
was
them.
left to the staff of the ride, none of them trained engineers. Maintenance staff did not know the location of the emergency stop button in the main control room and never tested it. Improvements to safety features were
I was scared of
deferred
escalators
because
too.
of
I'm
budgetary
so scared of
concerns.
escalators.
Record
You need to
keeping
report it back.
was described as shoddy. The ride was described as completely unsafe, and it was concluded
Knitting
that there
along?
had been
Hell
failures
yeah.
on the part of everybody at the
Time
park.
to hydrate. Don't mind if I do, Mothman. Thanks for looking out for me.
It is important to note that these
that.
criticisms were directed specifically at the Dreamworld Thunder River Rapids ride. Other rides of this type, when properly managed and risk assessed, are extremely safe for guests.
I was thirsty.
Dreamworld
Oh gosh, my husband
cooperated fully
keeps saying
with the
he is going to get me on carnival rides,
And
mainly
when
the Zipper.
charges were finally
Look, to
laid
be perfectly
against
honest
them
with
under the
you,
Work
they're
Health and
mostly
Safety
safe,
Act
but
in
they're a
July
lot less
2020,
safe
they
than
pled
permanent
guilty without
fixtures
hesitation.
like in theme parks.
The parent company of the
Hydrate
theme
or
park,
dihydrate.
Ardent Leisure, received a fine of $3.6 million, the largest fine ever handed out for a workplace tragedy in Queensland.
I will always take stairs if I
The ride itself was
have
demolished
the
in
option.
November 2016.
I do not trust
and Dreamworld
elevators. I
plans
do
to
not
build
trust
a memorial
escalators.
garden in its place.
See you later, Ross. Have a good night.
They have invited those
Too
affected
short
by
for
the
most
tragedy
rides. I have
to be
been
involved
too
in
short
its
for a
design.
couple of rides in my time.
An
It's been a
offer
while
which
though.
has angered some of the survivors' families, as they are still awaiting
A lot of the
actual
times
compensation
the
from the park.
like the safety
The
bars
victims
don't
of this
close tight
disaster
enough for me
included
either, which
Kate
is
Goodchild,
kind of scary.
who boarded the ride with her 12-year-old
Yo,
daughter,
Amethyst Scales.
her brother,
What is
Luke
it about
Dorset, and
elevators
his
that you don't
partner,
like? Is it
Bruce
that
Bay
every
arriving.
time you step onto one, you're
Kate's
afraid
daughter
that
was
at
the
that
only one
exact
from that
moment
group
when you
to
have one
survive.
leg in and one leg out, it's gonna fall
Also
instantly
killed
and
was
slice
Cindy
you in
Lowe.
half? Because that's
Her
what
10-year-old
scares
son
me.
was the only other survivor from the affected raft.
Elevators are awful. They're
All
just
four
awful. I do
victims
not
were on
have
holiday.
claustrophobia in any
They
way,
had
shape, or
visited
form.
Dreamworld to experience its rides and roller coasters, fully believing that these attractions were safe.
And then once you're on
This
them,
was a
once you're
reasonable
on the
belief,
fucking elevator,
as many
yeah,
regulatory
you
standards
fucking
exist to ensure
it
that
is
amusement
machinery
park
that
rides
moves
are as
with you
safe as
inside.
possible.
It's crazy because I fucking love a
incident
roller
at
coaster.
Dreamworld,
Put me
which
on a
cost them
fucking
their
roller
lives,
coaster. I'm game.
shows,
I've been on
however,
the slingshot
that these
thingy.
standards can
I love
only
G-Force
work
rides.
when ride owners and operators actually deign to apply them.
But for some
Dreamworld
reason, an escalator
overhauled its
fucking
safety procedures
terrifies
across
me.
the
It
park
just terrifies
and
me.
reopened a month after the tragedy.
I do not like it. I will take
It
the
has
stairs.
continued
Thank
to
you.
operate ever
Unless
since.
okay, up to a point. Up to a point.
The
If
site
we're
of the
going up
Thunder
like
River Rapids
10
ride is
stories, I'll
currently
probably
vacant.
take the elevator so
The
it's not
construction of the
inconvenience
memorial
whoever I'm
garden
with and like get
is
all
currently
sweaty and stuff.
on
Because
hold.
I also, fun fact, have hyperhidrosis, so I sweat very easily. Hi, Self Myself, how are you? Imagine standing in line for 3 hours just to die on the worst ride in Dreamworld. Is that true? Oh no. Sorry, Senek. You think you have hyperhidrosis? It's the worst. It is not fun. I have it like
On
pretty
the
much all over my
26th of
torso.
May,
Like
1978,
everywhere
a
on my
new
whole torso,
attraction
my
opened
and my
in the
like arms
township
and head.
of Vernon, New Jersey. For the next 20 years, this unassuming US town would be the home to Action Park. A
Action
theme park and water park that would
Park!
soon become notorious
Infamous.
for its terrible safety record.
All right, 1, 2, 3,
Before the
4,
sale of the
5,
park
6,
to new
7,
owners in
8.
1998, 6 guests would have died while riding its insanely unsafe attractions, and many hundreds more would have sustained serious injuries.
9.
Action Park
10.
was the brainchild
I know that
of Eugene Mulvihill,
Alpine
owner
slides
of Great
are
American
super
Recreation.
unsafe, but I'm desperate to
The
try
company
one.
already operated a
Watch
ski
so many
area,
videos on this park.
but
Yeah, it's
Mulvihill
it's
wanted
like
to expand the business
the
so
theme
that they
park
could generate revenue during the summer
that
as
people
well.
hear about. You know what I
To do this,
mean?
He added an alpine
it's
slide
the one
down
that
one
people
of the ski slopes, as well as 2 water slides.
People told him it
and
was
a
too
go-kart
soon,
track.
to which he responded, saying it's too soon implies
Action
there will
Park
one day be a
was
time when
born.
it's okay to joke.
Although during its first
And I
year
don't
of
wait
operation,
in line for
it
anything
traded
comedy.
under the
Is
less
it
exciting
Dream
name
World?
of Vernon Valley Summer Park.
Who is this guy?
The adoption of the name Action Park and the addition
Just
of
out
more
with my
rides
grandmother for
took
her
place
upcoming
over the
birthday.
next
Happy
2 or
birthday,
3
Grandma.
years. The park hit its peak in the early and mid-1980s. At this time, over 1 million people per year were flocking in to ride around 75 different rides and water slides.
I really, really, really want to try an alpine slide.
The park
just
had
so
not
bad.
yet garnered a reputation as unsafe, but injuries were frequent. The alpine slide, the first ride ever to be installed, was one of the worst culprits when it came to injuring guests.
Like, I for sure would have gotten hurt in that park.
820 meter or
definitely I would have.
2,700 foot slide consisted of a channel made from concrete, fiberglass, and asbestos, down which tiny wheeled carts would be
Okay, and if I hadn't got injured, I would have gotten cancer,
the
it
carts
sounds
were operated
like.
by the riders, who were required to pull a lever to apply the brakes when approaching sharp turns or getting too close to other carts. These brakes, however, didn't always work, and weren't always applied correctly by guests.
He's an Australian stand-up comedian and a known online nuisance prankster. If you ever heard that story of someone's chastity belt getting hacked
were only wearing
and held
bathing
ransom
suits,
for crypto coin, that was
severe
BS he made
abrasions
up.
all over their
Yeah, I've
bodies
never
from the
heard of
surface
that,
the
but that's
slide,
funny.
and many were concussed.
I could see that
or broke
becoming like
limbs.
a hot topic
In
on the
1984
internet.
and 1985, the alpine slide alone was responsible for 14 fractures and 26 head injuries. Another infamous ride was the Super Go-Karts. Again, guests were in control of their own ride vehicles as they piloted single-seater buggies around a concrete track. The go-karts came with a speed limiter, but this could easily be circumvented by wedging a tennis ball in the right spot, something many employees would happily do for guests that requested it.
Oh my god.
Even for those who didn't.
Stuck at 4'8" and only weigh 75 pounds. Been this small since I was 9. I jump on elevators to freak people out. Mean.
50 miles per hour.
Mean. You think go-karts were safe enough, but then they had
frequently resulted in
handsome
very
assholes of
injuries.
blue shell. It's very...
Worse yet, even riders who escaped injury were often made sick by the petrol fumes from the poorly maintained engines of the carts. The park's water rides were also responsible for some grave injuries. The Cannonball Loop, for example, resulted in so many injuries that it was actually shut down after just one season.
That.
The ride consisted of an enclosed water slide similar to those elsewhere in the park, but with one crucial difference. There was a vertical loop at the bottom. There's a reason that loops are not commonly seen on water slides.
Yeah.
They are incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
If a rider didn't have sufficient speed to complete the full loop,
they
would usually
stuck.
stall out at the top and then fall straight down, smashing into the inside wall of the flume.
That does not sound like
Broken
a good
noses
time.
and back injuries were the predictable result.
Yeah.
The main danger to patrons enjoying the wave pool, on the other hand, wasn't blunt trauma, but instead drowning. This attraction,
I feel like that's just a thing in wave pools, right?
Of a large
like
pool
wave pools
and a
are
machine
notoriously
that
pretty
generated
dangerous,
sizable
hey?
waves. This type of attraction is often mildly dangerous, but at Action Park it was deadly. Lifeguards there sometimes had to rescue as many as 30 people in a single weekend. This frightening statistic was down to the design of the pool. The waves were extremely large and powerful and tended to wash patrons towards the deep end of the pool. Many would be surprised when they suddenly found themselves out of their depth.
Added
to this was the fact that Action Park
creating panic in the water is the last thing that you want to do. Like, that's just the most deadly thing
when the
waves
waves
that you
began
can
getting
possibly
rough,
do.
There would often be such a scramble to exit the pool that people would be injured clambering over one another on the ladders to escape. Those are just some of Action Park's poorly designed attractions. Others included the Tarzan swing, a gigantic swing which patrons were required to let go of at just the right time, or risk smashing into concrete on the far side of the splash pool.
That's terrifying!
That splash pool, by the way, was so cold that riders often couldn't swim out and had to be rescued.
Action Park is fucking...
There were also diving cliffs with no warning or barriers to prevent swimmers from passing by underneath. Multiple slides with very low barriers on either side and a deadly drop should you skip those barriers. And a super speedboats ride, which inebriated patrons would often turn into a bumper boats experience, with predictably injurious results. As an aside, it's no surprise that many of these rides were dangerous. They were built, for the most part, by people with very little engineering knowledge or experience, and safety tested mainly by trial and error. Employees were offered cash incentives to be the first to try out new rides, and once a few employees had survived an experience,
I've been scared in wave pools before. I don't think I've ever been like close to death or drowning or anything, but like I've been definitely been like, ooh,
injuries were inevitable.
This is less fun scary and more like mortal scary.
Action Park
bumper boats are rad as hell, but like you have to have it has to be an actual bumper boat with like the super strong like rubber or whatever it is around.
Steer vehicles, keep themselves afloat.
Oh, New Jersey! I missed that part. Suddenly it makes sense. Everything's legal in Jersey, hey?
When guests were injured in the course of riding an attraction, the park would inevitably claim that the guest was at fault for failing to follow the rules, riding in the wrong position, or overestimating their ability to swim in rough waters. This laissez-faire attitude ultimately had deadly consequences. Over the course of 10 years, 3 guests drowned in the wave pool, earning it the macabre nickname of the Grave Pool. Another guest suffered a cardiac arrest.
I'm sorry for fucking laughing at that. It caught me off
the cold water beneath the
Tarzan
swing.
Now to rewatch Action Point, the Johnny Knoxville film about Action Park, I didn't know that was a thing.
After being thrown from the Alpine slide.
I watched the HBO documentary on it, and it was sick. It was just really good.
Death
nice.
Number 6 occurred on a ride called the Kayak Experience in 1982. This ride consisted of an imitation white water course, which guests would ride in single-seater kayaks. These kayaks would often get stuck or tip over, requiring guests to climb out and stand in the water to right them again. A 27-year-old man was doing just this when he stepped on a metal grating that, due to exposed wiring, had become electrified. He went into cardiac arrest and later died.
That's so scary.
You might wonder why a park like this was allowed to go on existing. In today's regulatory climate, Action Park would, thankfully, be shut down within a season. Back in the 1980s, however, regulations were far more lax, and information about ride safety was not readily available to the public. Although the park had a reputation as being a somewhat risky day trip, most visitors probably never knew the true extent of the danger.
Really? Okay, I thought that
many lawsuits were brought against the park, but few were successful.
Okay.
Nonetheless, the mounting cost of defending itself from claims was what ultimately began the park's decline. This, combined with a recession in the early 1990s, left Action Park severely short on funds. In an effort to save money during the 1995 season,
Knoxville saw the Robertson documentary and became inspired to learn
insurance.
everything about the park, its creation, and then make a stunt film about it. It
This
came out a few years ago, and I remember liking it.
bid
I've never
just
even heard of it.
wasn't
I'm
sufficient.
definitely going to figure it out.
In 1996, Great American Recreation, the owners of Action Park, were forced into bankruptcy. The park closed as usual.
Class
at the
Action
end of
Park
the
is
1996 season,
the one that I saw
and
for
did not
sure.
reopen the
That was
next year.
the HBO documentary, right?
That was the end.
Or
of
maybe I
Action
just
Park.
saw it on HBO.
After substantial
Maybe it wasn't
investment,
like by
Canadian
HBO.
resort
Maybe I'm like
developer did
making that
reopen
up.
the park, but under a different name, and with all of the dangerous attractions removed or altered to be made safe. It's now known as Mountain Creek Water Park, and has operated without major incident for many years. The strangest thing about Action Park is that, despite irresponsible owners, dangerous rides, multiple fatalities, and thousands of injuries, it is still remembered by many who visited it with great fondness. Journalist Chris Gettard summed up the general feeling about Action Park in an article for Weird NJ. Action Park was a true rite of passage for any New Jerseyan of my generation. When I get to talking about it with other Jerseyans, we share stories.
Yeah, it's called Class Action
veterans
Park,
who
Quinn.
served in
It's the one I
combat
saw.
together.
I liked it a lot. It had like
I suspect that many of us may have come
riders that had
closest to
gotten
death
injured
on
there,
some of those
people that were
rides
friends
up
with
in
people that
Vernon
had
Valley.
died there.
I consider it a true
former
shame
employees,
that future generations will never know the terror
people
of
that went
proving
there a
their
bunch.
grit at New Jersey's most dangerous amusement park. Action Park has become a myth, an urban legend.
Straight up, though,
Yes,
it totally
it
has.
was the cause of a great deal of pain and grief, but as bizarre as it might seem, many happy memories were also made at Action Park.
I thought that you had to like literally have a death wish to go there, that like everybody knew that it was super dangerous. We're pre-internet, remember? You can't just Google that shit. Right, but I definitely remember hearing about any kind of accidents in any kind of theme park even before the internet. You know what I mean? Like, I definitely remember that kind of thing being huge news. However, I imagine that since these guys spent all their dang money on like trying to keep that shit hush-hush, that probably had a lot to do with it. I mean, everyone knew it was kind of dangerous, but the extent of the danger is a bit downplayed, I think. Yeah, that's what he was saying.
Park in Mason,
I
Ohio.
didn't realize. I legit thought that it was just like you went there if you were
when two
very
fatal
brave.
freak accidents occurred almost simultaneously.
Because
The
I
day
know
would come to be
people
known
that
by
like
fans of the park
have
as
learned about it
Black
and
Sunday,
lamented the fact that it's
day when three
like
guests
safer
lost
now
their
because they'll
lives
never be
in
able to
two
go there
completely
and
separate
see it, even though it's
and
not safe
initially, at
or
least,
whatever, which is like
completely inexplicable
the dumbest shit I've ever heard, essentially.
Kings Island was laid out like many theme parks, with a central landmark surrounded by various zones or lands.
Is it okay when I hold
In
the project here, like, just
one
barely
prominent
above
zone in the park was
my
themed
webcam?
after the
Is this
Bavarian
okay for
folk
everybody? If
festival,
you don't like it, please let me
Oktoberfest,
know. Vote yay if
buildings
this is
designed to
fine.
look
Vote
like
nay
cozy wooden
if you
cabins.
prefer I move it.
In the Oktoberfest
Because I
zone,
can move it more
guests were
often
able
if I
to
need to.
grab a stein of beer
But this
and a
is
bite
just
to
what's
eat,
like lazy and easy
wander
for me.
through various landscaped gardens, and also ride a number of relatively mild rides. Just before 9 p.m.
I don't know. I would have loved to
22-year-old
attend when it was
Timothy
incredibly
Binning
unsafe. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard,
21-year-old
Quinn.
William Heathcote
You're much smarter
were
than that.
crossing a bridge
It's
in the
just
Oktoberfest
Moth is just
zone
capital V
when
vote,
a bizarre
capital Y
incident
yay.
occurred.
Hello, Moonlit
The men were
Orchid.
both employees
Welcome.
of
Everybody
the
join me in
Ameritrust
welcoming Moonlit
Insurance Group,
Orchid.
and were at the
How are
park for
ya?
the company picnic. They had spent most of the day enjoying rides and drinks together. Now, as they headed towards one final ride, Binning reached over the railing.
Ooh, this
of
looks
the
like a
bridge
cute top,
towards
right?
a
And
jet
it's
of water from
free.
a nearby fountain,
I can't believe that
intending
that's
to
a free
jokingly
pattern with
splash
how
his
fucking
friend with the
gorgeous it
water.
is. It is really simple.
The moment Binning's hand
But,
made contact with the jet of water from the
so?
fountain, he experienced a powerful convulsion, which caused him to tumble over the railing of the bridge and into the water below. losing consciousness.
Moonlit Orchid, thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it.
Heathcote,
Zillia!
Dragon Sparkler, _oh so many months. Love you, babe.
Love you, babe!
But was also subjected to powerful convulsions and
no.
almost immediate unconsciousness when he plunged into the water.
Is it too late to do anything?
Also nearby
about
was
that?
park security guard Daryl Robertson. At just 20 years old, Robertson was a model employee. Indeed, he had recently received an award from the park for his dedication to guest service. When he saw two guests apparently in difficulty in the shallow pond, he didn't hesitate.
I'm really invested on making sure you have enough yarn, like you should, but also I'm paranoid I told you wrong.
Robertson
Don't even worry about it, Moth.
Like,
I
lost consciousness upon making contact with
should
the
really learn that kind of thing for myself. And when I,
like,
I understand. I'm not going to hold it against you at all if it's wrong. Don't worry, even remotely.
This guest used a garbage can lid to reach for the unconscious men and drag them from the pond with minimal actual contact.
Yeah, so if you
a
should.
passing nurse.
That's such a bummer.
And
what a horrible situation. That kind of shit makes my anxiety spike.
Others to perform
I'm sorry that's
CPR
happening to you.
On the three men. The time was around 9:45 p.m. Not far away from where the distressing incident at the Oktoberfest pond was taking place, 32-year-old Candy Taylor was boarding the Flight Commander ride. This ride consisted of multiple two-person pods on the end of articulated arms. These would
See,
rise
that looks
up
like my
along
kind of
the
ride.
central
I would love that.
tall tower, and then spin
that looks
for several
very
minutes,
fun.
much like a carousel,
especially if it's in like a really pretty place.
The thrills were further supplemented by a joystick in each ride vehicle, which allowed riders to control the articulation of their individual pod. Riders could tilt their pod, or even make it perform a full barrel roll if they had the stomach for it.
So fun.
Taylor was at the park.
Have they mentioned Big Splash? I have no idea.
She attended.
Not that I'm aware of. Popped in to do that, and now gotta run to bed. 4 a.m. comes stupid early and school is in session. Love you. Have a wonderful night. Celia.
When Taylor did board the ride then, she was alone, and was given an entire two-person pod to herself. The pods rose into the air, and the ride started to spin. Mere moments later, Taylor's pod flipped upside down, and she tumbled from it down to the ground, 21 meters, or 70 feet, below. Taylor's friends witnessed her fall, and quickly ran towards the grassy area where she had landed. They found her unconscious and gravely injured, but still just about breathing. Emergency services, meanwhile, had arrived at the Oktoberfest zone of the park, where they were busy preparing the three men for transport to hospital by ambulance and helicopter. They were still working to complete this operation when news of the Flight Commander incident reached them. No sooner had one helicopter been dispatched, another was brought into land in order to transport Taylor to hospital too. Despite a heroic effort on the part of ambulance personnel and passers-by, there would be only one survivor from either incident, Timothy Binning. He went on to make a full recovery, but unfortunately, William Heathcote, Daryl Robertson, and Candy Taylor were all declared dead on arrival at hospital.
God, it's just such a bummer because
were initially baffled
like
by
you're
both
out
incidents.
for a fun day with your buds, right?
Had
like
been working in the pond where Heathcote
the last
and
thing you're
Robertson
thinking
had
of
died
is
earlier
death.
that same day. How could the water have become so deadly in such a short space of time? It should have been impossible to slip free from the restraints of the Flight Commander. How had Taylor fallen to her death? Two separate investigations revealed the answers to these questions. The water in the pond where Heathcote and Robertson had died had, it was discovered, become electrified by a faulty aerator pump.
Sad.
As soon as any of the men made contact with the water, electricity coursed through their bodies, The convulsive effect of the electricity was what had caused Binnings to fall into the pond in the first place, and what had prevented all three men from simply wading clear of the shallow, calm pond. Heathcote had passed away after receiving a sustained electric shock, while Robertson had fallen unconscious and subsequently drowned. All of this might have been prevented had the park installed a simple circuit breaker on the electrical equipment in the pond. To do so would have cost almost nothing and taken just a few minutes. And yet it was something that the park had never implemented. Circuit breakers were missing not just on equipment in the Oktoberfest pond, but on several other pumps and aerators in water features elsewhere in the park. The park received a $23,500 fine. Park officials also ensured that circuit breakers,
sounds like a
which
fine
had, after all,
to
been
me.
required by law for almost 2 decades by that point, were fitted throughout the park. Railings on many bridges and walkways adjacent to water features were also heightened.
Good.
With regards to the flight commander, it was discovered that Taylor, who had enjoyed several drinks over the course of her day at the park, had passed out once the ride began moving. With her body completely limp, she had slumped across the 2 seats of her pod, something
That's
which
really
shouldn't
sad.
have been possible.
That's so sad.
Lone riders were always supposed
She just
to
had
be
a few too
paired
many
with a stranger
drinkies.
on board this ride. For reasons unknown, however, the ride operators on this particular night
Maybe
did
she
not
was being
insist that
belligerent
Taylor
and they
be
were
paired
like,
with someone
ooh.
else. Alone as she was, then, she had been able to slump sideways out of her harness. Her knee then made contact with the joystick, causing her pod to perform a barrel roll and ejecting her from the ride. The ride manufacturer, Intamin, was found to be liable for this incident, as the restraints were clearly inadequate. Although Taylor had been intoxicated at the time of the accident, the restraints should have been designed to hold her in place regardless.
I agree with that.
It is not uncommon for a rider to faint while on board a thrill ride.
Right.
And as such, rides must be fitted with restraints that can hold riders in place, even if they go limp or pass out. Taylor's family sued Intamin and settled out of court for an unknown sum. They also raised a civil suit against the park, who, although not responsible for the deficiencies in the ride, had sold Taylor the alcohol that contributed to her death.
So?
Again, this was settled out of court.
She chose to drink it!
The flight commander, after many modifications, was reopened, but never regained the same popularity, and was eventually sold to Flamingoland in the UK. Shortly after Taylor's death,
like if
the
they had
park
let her
stopped
drive
selling
out of
alcohol to
there or
guests,
whatever.
partly to prevent further incidents,
I don't know.
and partly to present a more welcoming image to families.
Oh, fuck.
The horrifying coincidence of these two
Was she
events
underage?
came to be
Oh,
known by
I
fans
didn't
of the
even
park
consider
as
that for
Black
some
Sunday.
reason. Maybe.
It was extremely unfortunate
Wanna
that
know how
two
I know I'm
incidents
old?
should occur so close together,
1, 2,
and the combined
3,
effect
4,
was extremely
5, 6,
shocking for
7,
all
8.
those who worked at the park. This unlikely coincidence, however, was not the only bizarre and fatal happening in Kings Island history. Over its many years of operation, the park also experienced several accidents for which it was in no
10.
way at fault.
I just want to make extra
However,
sure. I'm so
The
sorry.
events of Black
1,
Sunday should
2,
be remembered,
3, 4,
a reminder
5,
of how 1 in
7,
a million
8,
chances
9, 10.
can
Okay.
sometimes align in the most terrible of ways.
She was around 33. Yeah. It feels a little weird that anyone would sue a place that is known for serving alcohol for serving alcohol. I feel like that's a little frivolous. Then again, An amusement park shouldn't sell alcohol. Not gonna lie, you shut your fucking mouth. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. It's just very fun to get drunk at an amusement park. It's just a good time. Please don't shut your fucking mouth ever. I love when you say things. What was I fucking saying? I don't remember what I was saying.
On the 29th of April, 1972.
I do feel bad. That she was
maybe Mason, Ohio,
like
open for
the
business.
fact that they let her get so drunk
the 364
that she
acre
passed
amusement park
out
included a $2 million dark ride, a record-breaking roller coaster, and numerous other entertainments and attractions. It was a hit. Within just a few years, the park saw visitor numbers in the millions and was known not just across the state, but nationwide. Little spoken of, however, were several bizarre freak accidents that took place within the park in subsequent years.
Hi, Pondwater. Yeah, if you haven't watched Fascinating Horror, this is just like one of the many
incident to take place occurred on the 24th of July, 1976.
Subjects that he covers. He just covers like tragedies overall.
This attraction
and he's
of a 100
amazing. It's very well researched and delivered in like bite-sized videos. It's amazing content. Please, everybody, go subscribe to Fascinating Horror. It's a phenomenal channel.
Zebras,
even without alcohol, people pass out on rides sometimes. That's just a thing. The restraints should have prevented that. Yeah, like I agree. I do think that
other safaris, guests
I do think that
from their
suing
own
because of the alcohol is just
from a monorail train,
some nanny state
through the
shit.
Safari area and afforded excellent views of the animals. Rangers patrolled the habitats in jeeps, armed with shotguns and radios in case of emergency.
I'm from Canada. Our legal drinking age is 18 because we know it's dumb to drink at amusement parks. Okay, I'm an American.
The safari had been operating without major incident for 2 years when, one morning, Ranger John
It's less distressing than the usual cavalcade of predators and killers we're subjected to. It's true.
The scene initially baffled park officials. It appeared as though McCann had driven a Kings Island jeep into the lion enclosure, then exited it voluntarily while leaving behind his radio and shotgun. He was then attacked by lions. Blood smears indicated that he might have made it back to the jeep, briefly, before he was ultimately killed by multiple powerful bites.
Don't fuck with big cats, dude.
McCann was 20 years old at the time of the incident. It was not thought that he was suicidal, but colleagues did remark that he had often been careless around the lions before. Many people reported that he had a habit of patting them on the head or playfully tugging on their tails while working with them. He had previously
I do not know how to pronounce your name. I'm going to call you Pudding unless you give me some sort of guidance, but welcome. Everybody join me in welcoming Pudding.
Had sustained a
Thanks
serious
for
injury
being
to
here.
his neck after allowing a lion to climb on top of his vehicle, something which was very much against the rules. While clambering up, the animal had slipped, and its claw had passed between safety bars and slashed McCann's neck, an injury which required multiple stitches.
Oh man.
Even
so
after this frightening
mushrooms,
incident,
I always think red and white
McCann was extremely
because of
laissez-faire
course,
around the lions,
because Mario.
and continued to tug tails
but I love
pet them like
some
domesticated
like
animals.
I don't know. I
The
like it when
picture,
they're like
then,
I just
was
like
of a ranger
gem
who,
tones,
while
like
no
jewel
doubt
tones.
passionate about his job,
Love this channel. Me
was
too.
extremely relaxed
Holy
about
moly,
his own
such a
personal
safety. Nice dude too. When I emailed him and
Physical
was like,
evidence collected from the scene
"Please,
suggested
can
a
we?"
sequence of
He was like,
events.
"I am psyched to hear that." I can
While
just
driving
read it
his
to you
jeep
guys
through
if
the
you
lion
want.
enclosure
Actually,
to
I
check
shouldn't
on
do that,
cats,
but he
McCann had
was
stopped
very nice.
and
He was very
voluntarily
nice. He was
exited his
psyched
vehicle,
that I was a fan
most likely,
and
it
was just
seemed,
like
in order to relieve himself in
really
the bushes.
nice.
While he was doing so,
Off
he was
topic, but I
attacked by
found out
one
that
or
a girl
more
I grew up with
lions
is pregnant
and
and in her
killed
second
while
trimester.
trying
She
to
turned
get back
19
into his
yesterday. Isn't bad or anything, but weird.
In response
I
to the
feel
death,
like I guess
Kings
I've
Island
a
fired
lot
the
of my
contractor who
friends
ran
got
the safari
pregnant
part of the
really
park
young and early and
took
turned out
over
to be great
operations
parents.
themselves. something that would enable them
I
to
hope
terminate
that,
employees who did not take safety
I hope that she's
seriously.
happy with this situation and that she does a good job and
that,
she has
however,
a good support
there
net.
was little
She's
they
going to
could do.
definitely need it at that age.
McCann
I
was
was
found to be at
barely even a
fault by
fucking
every
human at
investigation into the
19,
incident,
but I am
and Kings
I'm
Island
really
faced
just
no
like
legal
slow
action as a
to
result
grow
of
and
his
learn and develop. I just always have been.
At the center of
Sincerely, Clara. Thanks for the follow. I appreciate
you.
you.
The Eiffel Tower,
1,
an imposing
2,
construction
3,
of
4,
steel
5,
and glass,
6,
which
7,
rises
8,
up to
9.
95 meters or 314 feet. By riding up,
My
in
mom
a
had my
series of
twin and I at
elevators,
17. Yeah.
guests were able to get
Well,
an
I've
excellent
known
view
a
of the
few
park
people that were
from
very
observation
very
platforms at
good
the
young
midpoint
mothers.
and top of the tower.
Jewel tone for top, but what for the body? I
The
love
Eiffel Tower is the
off
site
white.
of another incident on Friday the 13th of May, 1983. At the time, the park was hosting
Like a
one of
linen
series
color.
of grad night parties, evenings when the park would be set aside for graduating high school students from the local area. Among the students attending these special evenings was John Wesley Harter, an amiable and
No, my
well-liked
parents kind of
17-year-old
suck, so I'm just like, ooh,
who made the
okay.
drive to Kings Island along with a large group of friends. At some point in the night, however,
Luckily,
having
she's
consumed
happy
some
about it.
quantity
That's
of
the first
alcohol,
step to being
John
a good
became
parent is like
upset
actually wanting
and
the
parted
child,
ways
right?
from his companion.
So let's. I don't know. I reserve my judgment. I
group
hope
continued their
that
evening
everything
without
works
him,
out for
hoping that
her
he
and
would
for the
calm down
baby and
and
everybody's
be
happy and
reunited with them
healthy.
later.
Don't
They
be
enjoyed a
too
meal
worried. Don't
and
stress
then
out
headed
too
for the
much.
Eiffel Tower
So.
attraction to get a view of the park lit up at night.
It is young, for
the
what
group
it's worth.
rode up to the lower
But I
of
don't
the
find
two
it too
platforms,
shocking.
where it became apparent that something was amiss.
Some people that's their
Operators
whole
were experiencing
jam is they just
difficulty
want to
with the
have
elevators,
a
meaning that they
family
could not go
as
any
soon
higher.
as they can, you know?
After taking in the view from this modest vantage point, some of the group noticed
Even
something
for a
that
dark
looked
cottagecore?
like blood
Yeah.
on some of
You
the
don't
beams
think
of the
so?
tower.
If you don't like it,
Assuming that
don't do
some
it.
other
If that doesn't
students were
speak to
playing
you,
a
by all means,
distasteful
choose something
prank,
else.
they
I
left
think
the
that silver
attraction.
would look really nice.
It would not be until later that everyone involved would learn the truth. John was dead. He had died after visiting the Eiffel Tower where, for reasons unknown, he climbed over a fence, up an emergency staircase, and out onto a beam above a lift shaft. There, he was struck by a counterweight and briefly entangled in elevator cables. When the elevator next moved, he fell, landing on the roof of the car.
It's just weird to
This
see
had
people
been
getting
the
to that
source of
age
the
now,
blood
if you know what I
that
mean.
his
It was
friends
weird
had
for me
seen
then
on
too,
the
for
beams of
sure.
the tower.
I had like this weird air of superiority, like you won't
Nobody could
find
an
me getting
adequate
pregnant
explanation
and stuff
for
like
what
that.
happened to John.
And now that I look back on
The
it,
sequence of actions he
one
took
of
in
the
order to access
best
the beam
moms
above
I
the lift
know
shaft
got
were
pregnant
so
at 15,
specific
and
that it
she's
was
just
clear he
such a
intended to
good
be there.
mom.
But friends and family thought that suicide was vanishingly unlikely. It was speculated he might have been trying to jump onto the top of the elevator car in order to ride it upwards for a better view, something which was rumoured to be done on a regular basis, but which the park had no record of ever happening.
Of course they had no record of it
In any
ever
event,
happening.
Fencing
Come
and
on.
signage around the Eiffel Tower was redoubled, and it opened to visitors again after a thorough investigation. The park was not found to be at fault for the incident, and the Eiffel Tower remains in operation. It is a
Oh
popular
man,
visitor
Pudding,
attraction
I
to this day.
highly recommend, if you're a Redditor, the crochet community on Reddit
The
is
thing which
top
both
notch.
of these cases have
They're
in common
amazing
is
there.
that Kings Island was not responsible for what happened.
Sure thing, Kool-Aid, one moment.
In the park's long history, there have been incidents where the park was at fault, but these two cases were both down to random chance and bizarre and inexplicable choices on the parts of those involved. Even when everything is done right, even when all precautions are taken, the sheer unpredictability of human behaviour will still play a role.
Quinn, could I have you look at DoxyChat Discord for me, please, and thank you? I've been meaning to do that for ages. Fuck me. I can't count and I can't keep a number in my head to save my life. Really quick, before this video, I think it's time for us to take our first break. We've been live an hour and a half. I gotta pee real bad, so if everybody would hang tight, I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. I would love if you guys would tweet out the stream and get your buds in here. That'd be amazing. I would be so delighted. Okay, we'll be back shortly. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Could I get 5 readies in chat and we'll just get right the fuck back to work here? Sounds good to me if it sounds good to you, etc. Pardon me. Oof. Hell yeah, okay. Everybody's ready.
Disney World Resort.
I'm going to start this over because I talked over the beginning of it. Missed you guys. Who's gonna see you?
On the 5th of July, 2009, at the Walt Disney World
man,
Resort
I kind of
in
missed
Florida,
Dead by Daylight, but also I am so much better off not playing that shit all the time.
This fatal crash, however, did not take place on a roller coaster or other thrill ride, but instead on the resort's monorail system, designed to transport guests around and between the parks. The monorail system at Walt Disney World was installed in 1971 and expanded several times during the 1970s and 1980s. By the end of 1988, it consisted of 3 loops with a total of 6 stations along the way, a configuration that has remained unchanged ever since. 2 of these loops are dedicated
Adventureland
to the
has
Magic
a
Kingdom
ski lift that just takes you from one
like
deep corner to the opposite. I really like that, but I feel like Disney is much bigger and probably needs more than that, hey?
The other is a resort line.
I need to count these shells really quick,
around the Magic Kingdom.
just because this feels a little tight for us to be ending, but there isn't another place for me to put another one, so give me a moment.
As a passenger, if you wish to go from the Epcot loop to either of the Magic Kingdom loops, you must disboard and change trains through the Transportation and Ticket Center. However, for the purposes of managing the system, it is possible to move trains between the loops.
The monorail?
This is done on a routine basis using a switch in the track.
I thought that all the rides were just free once you were in.
A number of parties are responsible for managing these track switches. On board each monorail train is a pilot who is, of course, responsible for driving the train. A supervisor based in a central control room is responsible for providing the pilot with instructions, and a panel operator in another control room is responsible for switching on and off power in the track and activating the track switches. All parties are in constant radio contact. The incident took place at 2 a.m. on the 5th of July 2009. While most parts of the park were generally closed by this time of night, the monorails continued to run in order to allow guests to get back to their hotels. 3 trains were in operation on the Epcot line at the time: Monorail Pink, Monorail Purple, and Monorail Coral. Monorail Pink was ready to be taken out of service for the night. To be able to get back to the maintenance area where trains were usually parked when not in use, it would need to move from the Epcot line to the Magic Kingdom Express line. The first part of this operation went smoothly. Monorail Pink moved past the spur track joining the 2 lines and came to a complete halt. Then reported in to the supervisor that it had done so. The supervisor in turn contacted the panel operator and asked them to switch the track so that Monorail Pink could back up onto the spur line. This is where something went wrong. The panel operator cut power to the Epcot line, ready to make the switch, but was then distracted by 2 almost simultaneous radio calls relating to other trains. After dealing with these, the panel operator returned power to the Epcot line, incorrectly thinking that he had already made the switch. He had not. The panel operator contacted the supervisor. The supervisor contacted Monorail Pink and cleared the pilot to back up onto the spur line.
The monorail is free too? Okay, weird.
Monorail Pink began to back up. Of course, since the track had not actually been switched, the train didn't back up onto the spur track, but instead moved back along the Epcot line. Running along the Epcot line in a conflicting direction was Monorail Purple.
There we go.
Which had a single pilot and 6 passengers on board. The pilot of this train would not have had long to react, but in the few moments he did have, he put the train into reverse. His final act was clearly intended to protect the passengers on board from danger. At 2 a.m, the trains collided and came to a halt, partially inside the Ticket and Transportation Centre.
God, I feel like this is a very big shirt. I feel like this would be very loose on me.
The front cab of Monorail Purple were crushed and entangled,
starting to get kind of nervous about it, but we'll see.
Despite the best efforts of passengers and staff, he could not be saved.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
The victim of this incident was 21-year-old Austin Wenenberg. He was a popular and well-liked young man, described by those who knew him as a genius and a perfect son.
19.
Following his death, he was remembered fondly by family, colleagues, and even by hundreds of guests who had the pleasure of meeting him during their time at Walt Disney World. Disney were quick to determine that no part of the ride system was malfunctioning.
32, 33,
the monorail was up and running again the very next day,
40. Yeah,
even as an investigation took place. The National Transportation Safety Board compiled a report, noting that there were many things which could, and perhaps should, have prevented the collision. For example, the monorail
is
was,
that
a
YouTube channel that I have permission to watch on stream? I'll look at that, but I won't.
However, this system routinely had to
I probably won't be able to watch this on stream.
Train onto the spur track between loops, and so could not
Hello, stop
taking place. Equally, the supervisor might have been able to determine that the switch had not gone as planned, had they been in the control room at the time of the accident. Unfortunately, they had been out of the room, possibly at a nearby food outlet, and had been relying on radio contact only to manage the few trains on the system.
1, 2, 3,
Perhaps
4,
the
5.
pilot of Monorail Pink might have noticed that they were on the wrong track, but the two tracks were visually
1, 2,
very
3,
similar.
4. This is number 5, but still.
Combined with partially fogged up windows and low ambient light, it was determined that it would have been very difficult for the Monorail Pink pilot to realise that they were on the wrong track. Even then, guidance existed stating that before backing up a monorail train, pilots should move from the cab at the front end of the train to the cab at the rear. However, this was not a practice that was typically required or requested by supervisors, even though it was technically on the books. Accordingly, it was not done on this occasion.
Quinn, run for president and be there
Finally,
for eternity without having to be there.
Correctly switched the track, as they had access to
Just
a video
become
feed of
the United States president. I feel like if Donald Trump can, fucking anyone can.
To check
anyone
this
has
only
a shot.
Before making the switch to ensure that no train was in the way. The panel operator had never been briefed to check the video feed after making the switch to ensure that they had done so correctly.
What channels have given you permission? In panels underneath of the stream, there's a list.
Opportunity to avert disaster.
Under the thank you panel, the credits panel.
This opportunity was narrowly missed. A slew of changes were made by Disney in the aftermath of the accident. A spotter is now required to be present in the rear-facing cab whenever a monorail train reverses. All staff receive extra training. Window defoggers are used. More live video feeds covering switches have been installed, and a second shop panel operator must verify each switch visually before the go-ahead can be given for a pilot to move. As a precaution,
I can't list
the practice
them.
of
I don't
allowing
have
guests
my keyboard.
to ride in the front
Well,
cab of the monorail has also been discontinued. All these changes, and more besides, make the monorail at Walt Disney World safer than it ever has been. Interestingly, only a small portion of each train involved was destroyed in the incident. The undamaged portions were repurposed, becoming Monorail Teal and Monorail Peach, both of which remain in service to this day.
Nexpo.
Since the 5th of July, 2009, The system has transported
now
almost 150,000
this person,
people
and then
per
also
year
morbidology.
without another deadly incident.
I think that's everybody. Hi, Reaper.
That's the story of the one fatal crash in the Walt Disney World monorail's history. Compared to other attractions within the resort, the monorail seems like a relatively simple and unassuming machine. There are no sharp gradients, no special effects, only moderate speeds, and a very simple route.
How this is happening.
But this simplicity is deceiving.
I'm so sorry that I'm having
Even
such
the most
trouble
basic ride
at this
is,
moment
in fact, an
with this
incredibly
project.
complicated network of procedures and systems. Systems which must, as this incident demonstrates, be as carefully managed as any other.
Someday I'll be used to having fingernails. Someday. Okay, get ready to clip this. We've got
On the 11th of May, 1984.
We have permission from Morbidology, from that chapter, from Dreading Crime and Psychology, from Nexpo, from
feeding flammable building materials and decorations.
Fascinating Horror.
There were around 30 guests inside the attraction.
And from Inside a Mind has given blanket permission. JCS has given blanket permission.
The haunted castle,
and I'm waiting on permission. Like, I might not ever get it, but I have sent out a ton of emails to other people that haven't gotten back to me yet.
Enjoying frequent scares along the way. These were provided by special effects, including strobes and recorded sounds, as well as live actors dressed in costume who would jump out from hidden alcoves. While it was themed to resemble a crooked castle, the attraction was actually built from 16 interconnected truck trailers. These were arranged in a symmetrical configuration, with 8 on each side.
Hi, Mama Kitty Store.
Each set of 8 trailers contained a more or less identical maze of corridors.
Thank you, Kool-Aid. Thank you very much.
Only one side would be opened, but both sides could be run at once when the park was busy.
I think that's all correct.
There was also a central trailer, which served as a control room and dressing room for the live actors. On the evening of the 11th of May, 1984,
a really just awful stitch that is giving me so much trouble. This is the last time I'll have to interact with it.
Just before 6:30 p.m., a small fire
I just want it to be right because this project is going in the shop.
The trailers were made from aluminium, but were packed with flammable materials.
I'm not trying to make an imperfect project
here.
Paper
coverings on most surfaces, wood and foam props, and foam crash pads on some walls. Around 30 people were inside when the fire began. The rapid spread of flames and smoke, combined with the deliberately confusing layout of the haunted castle, made it difficult for guests to evacuate.
Okay.
One guest who did manage to escape noted that he'd stumbled, tripped, and bounced off walls as he fled, and that his decision to leave had been delayed because, upon first seeing flames and smoke, he mistook them for just another special effect.
I'm so frustrated and confused.
Fire and rescue services were called promptly and arrived on scene within minutes, but the fire was so fierce that the affected side of the attraction was all but destroyed by the time they managed to bring it under control. It was, for a brief time, thought that all patrons had been successfully evacuated, but this notion was quashed when 8 bodies were discovered in the wreckage, most of them in the same narrow corridor. Some of them were so severely burned that they were initially mistaken for burned mannequins from the haunted castle's theming. The 8 victims were all from the same group of friends. Among the dead were 18-year-old Nicola Kayatsa, 17-year-old Joseph Beiruti, 15-year-old Tina Genovese, 18-year-old Eric Rodriguez, 17-year-old Samuel Valentin, 17-year-old Lenny Ruiz,
I think it's a Valentin.
17-year-old Jose Carrion, and 17-year-old Christopher Harrison. The park was briefly closed while an investigation took place. The initial cause of the fire was soon identified. A 13-year-old survivor named Joey Irica testified that he had seen another teenage boy using the flame from a cigarette lighter to find his way through a darkened part of the maze. While doing so, Irica testified, the older boy had accidentally brought the flame too close to a ripped piece of foam dangling from a foam-clad wall, causing it to ignite. The boy with the lighter was never identified. While using an open flame in such a confined space is a foolish course of action, investigators noted that he was not to blame for the disaster.
Oh my goodness, Henry Roots, thank you so much for the follow, I appreciate you.
Park management and to a range of state-level inspection agencies. These parties, it was alleged, had allowed the haunted castle to operate without proper safety systems.
Now? I am sad.
In an increasingly
don't know. It had to have been an accident, or you might have said a YouTube auto bad word.
No working smoke
I'm really sorry that happened. Clara,
Both
I trust
had been recommended by fire safety consultants.
I'm sorry.
But weren't actually mandatory, since the haunted castle was considered to be a temporary structure, and building codes at the time did not require smoke alarms or sprinkler systems inside temporary structures. Of course, the haunted castle had been in place for almost 5 years at the time of the disaster.
No.
Thus,
I'll sing a song at your funeral
of temporary.
Of how kind and beautiful and funny and wise you were.
It was revealed that many of the emergency exit lights and other fixtures and fittings within the maze had been in poor condition at the time of the disaster.
Okay.
Employees noted that bulbs were missing or broken in many emergency lights, and that the foam padding on the wall where the fire had begun
We're good. Everything's
was ripped
fine.
and exposed
Never mind.
when it should have been neatly sealed. Shift managers also reported that guests had been witnessed using matches and lighters to illuminate their
anybody
way
that we don't watch is either somebody that I don't want to watch or somebody that I haven't asked permission for yet. But there are places in the Discord that you can recommend content to me. Suggest a mystery if you want to submit a channel that you think that I maybe haven't thought of. Then go ahead and link to the channel, and then in parentheses put creepy crochet.
Reporting safety violations with the words, "Forget it. Too numerous to mention." Despite this record of poor maintenance,
I'm sorry, Clara. I'm really sorry that happened to you.
Park and its
it had to have been like either one of my YouTube mods maybe accidentally misclicked and didn't realize.
Jurors laid the blame at the feet of Jackson Township officials,
or there
who repeatedly
was
allowed the castle to
in the
slip through
YouTube
cracks in the
bot
fire code.
That fucked up.
The park
I really
had
don't
followed
know.
the
I'm really
regulations
sorry.
it was
I hope
required
that
to
you don't
follow
hold
by
it
law,
against us.
but the law had simply not required enough.
Okay, 4.
8 civil suits were brought against the park,
5.
7 of which were settled out of court for $2.5 million apiece. The remaining suit went to trial,
6.
and the family involved were ultimately awarded a significantly lesser sum.
7. Has anyone ever said no, you can't when asked if you can watch on stream?
Jersey
Mostly I get ignored, but I have had people say no, and I think that that's totally fair.
Like the haunted castle, which was intended to confuse or disorientate visitors.
There are some people that are like that take this as like React content essentially, and some people do not like.
And that when a fire alarm was triggered, lights should automatically come on, and confusing sound effects and music should automatically be muted. Other states were quick to adopt New Jersey's rules, leading to a revolution in scare attraction safety across America. Despite this, several attractions in New Jersey suffered as a result of the disaster, and many went out of business. Six Flags Great Adventure itself very nearly folded in 1987, in part due to negative coverage concerning the fire. it was ultimately able to recover and move forward.
Obviously, you two were scared of my mounting power. It wouldn't surprise me. You are looking awfully powerful today.
The set of trailers, which
aren't your hands tired by now? Nope.
Has long since been removed.
I take breaks.
It has been replaced by a new
Welcome back, Quinn.
The Cyborg Cyber
Judging
Spin.
for Magic the Gathering, or
there is no memorial nor any lasting sign of the attraction which stood there in 1984, but it is safe to say that the haunted castle will not be forgotten. It remains a powerful spectre for the families of those lost in the fire, and a terrible warning to legislators and fire safety officials on the dangers of letting things
I was here hours ago and you're still knitting?
Well,
I've only been live for 1 hour and 56 minutes, and I'm crocheting. So, incorrect on both counts, bud. Oops. We don't need to do that. I'm just giving you a hard time, Pineapple. Rory the cat is an idiot. I have my toolbox on my pile of clothes on the chair, and he climbed up on top of all of it and chose to glare at me for how uncomfy it is. That's hilarious. The Judge Academy has regular conferences. My region is doing Zoom meetings each night this week. Oh, dang.
On the 8th of July 2011, a guest riding the Ride of Steel roller coaster
Do you just have to give your ruling on like what the wording of a card means most of the time, or like what are your duties as a judge if you feel like talking about it? If you don't feel like talking about it or whatever, don't feel obligated.
In the investigation which followed, it was found that he should never have been allowed on the ride in the first place, but that his decision to board the roller coaster that would ultimately kill him had not once been challenged by any member of staff working at the park. The history of the amusement park at Darien Lake goes all the way back to 1955. That was the year that a large man-made lake was opened to the public near the town of Darien in New York State. Visitors could pay 50 cents to spend a day by the water,
so unbothered by
and
stuff. It's crazy.
It was a popular spot, and as the years went by, more and more attractions were introduced. In the 1960s, you could go boating on the lake, fish for trout in a specially stocked pond, ride ponies beside the water, or hire out a camping spot and spend the night. In the 1970s, a series of small rides and attractions were added, including a petting zoo, several water slides, and a miniature golf course.
Oh yeah, Amethyst Scales. Thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate you.
A fully fledged amusement park. The first major roller coaster opened in 1982, along with multiple other flat rides. Further expansion in the 1990s saw an on-site hotel, a dedicated water park, and a massive concert venue added to the park's offerings.
Okay, what would you issue a penalty for, and what would the penalty look like?
Theme park destination. Superman Ride of Steel, later renamed to simply The Ride of Steel, was just one of several large roller coasters in the park. It was opened to the public in 1999 and was tall enough to qualify as a hypercoaster. It featured not just a 205 foot or 65 meter drop, but several airtime hills and 2 helixes, subjecting riders to some incredible but thrilling G-forces during its 2-minute runtime.
Okay, fine.
From the day it opened, the ride was popular, welcoming thousands of riders each day.
This is my knitting hook. I've got a couple of crochet needles right here too.
Although there was one serious incident in the very first year of operation.
You called my bluff, bud.
On the 16th of May, 1999, the second day that the ride had been open to the public, a guest was ejected from the roller coaster as it crested one of the smaller hills. He survived the fall, but suffered multiple hernias that would cause him pain and limit his mobility for the rest of his life.
A hernia is like...
It was found that, because of the size of the guest, the lap bar had locked
one of my
in the
worst
wrong
nightmares.
Position, and had thus failed to keep him secure throughout the ride.
Hell yeah, Delarge.
Darien Lake, which at the time was owned by Six Flags, was ordered to pay the injured guest $3.95 million, and subsequently made alterations to the restraint system of the ride, including the addition of a supplementary seatbelt. For the decade following this incident, the coaster
really
operated
disturbing
smoothly
weird
and without
shit.
issue.
Also, it's good to see you.
It wasn't until 2011
I have been thinking a lot about the proposition that you made me, and I need to reach back out to you because I have we have a discussion to have, I think.
Park with several members of his family. Sergeant Hakama was a veteran of the Iraq War, and in the course of his service had been seriously injured by an improvised explosive device. The explosion had caused him to lose the majority of both of his legs, and had put him into a coma for 2 months, after which he'd had to relearn many basic skills, including speaking and eating. Despite this traumatic
Your brother had hernia surgery last year? Ooh, it's one of my worst nightmares. I hope it never happens to me.
He even offered advice to people in a similar position. Hang on. You can make
Drawing extra cards and have the opponent look at their hand and pick a card to shuffle away.
Certainly, Sergeant Hakama put in a lot. Even after his injury, he lived an active lifestyle. He went to watch live sporting events.
It's on that chapter. Sick. Okay.
Ate out with his friends and family.
Pop it into the
rides with a specially adapted bike.
Discord. Lil.
Despite his positive outlook and extraordinary tenacity, though, he did note that it was difficult to adjust to his new life. Visiting Darien Lake Amusement Park, therefore, might well have been a welcome return to normality. He was keen to share a vacation with his loved ones and ride as many rides as he could. Sergeant Hakama, his sister, his 2 young children, and a college-aged nephew checked into the Darien Lake Hotel and made their way into the park at around 2:30 p.m. that day. One of Sergeant Hakama's first stops was a guest information booth, where he asked park staff which rides he could safely enjoy.
Is this about Darien Lake, apparently?
Why
do I have to simp for David Bowie at this hour? Because you should be simping for David Bowie at all hours.
He declined to take it, noting that he already had one. The park staff then advised him on the boarding procedure for wheelchair users. In the case of most rides, he would be asked to enter via the exit, where he could then be assisted safely onto the ride. One of the first rides on the itinerary for the day was the Ride of Steel. As he had been instructed, Sergeant Hakama, accompanied by his nephew, entered through the exit of the ride. This allowed him easy access to the boarding area, but also meant that he did not have his height checked by a ride attendant to make sure he was tall enough to ride. As it happened, because of the loss of his legs, Sergeant Hakama was actually too short for the Ride of Steel. Nonetheless, he went through to the boarding area, where he declined assistance from the ride staff, instead allowing his nephew to help him from his wheelchair onto the ride. Once both were seated at the very front of the train, the ride began.
If that's true, then you were in places that you were not supposed to be.
Several twists and turns, and a series of camelback
awarded
hills.
$3 million from it, yeah.
As the train passed over the crest of each of these hills, riders would experience a brief moment of weightlessness. It was during one of these moments that Sergeant Hakama was ejected from the train. Witnesses report that on the crest of one hill, the hat he was wearing almost flew from his head. As he instinctively reached up to secure it, he was thrown from the car altogether and fell to the ground below. Although the alarm was raised within minutes and help was quickly on scene, his injuries were not survivable.
Sad.
In the aftermath of the incident, the ride was closed and an investigation was launched. Mechanical defects with the ride or any of its trains were quickly ruled out, and it was determined that Sergeant Hakama simply should not have been allowed to board.
Good, Quinn. I'm happy to hear that.
Signs at the entrance and exit of the ride area noted, among many other rules, that all riders were required to have 2 legs.
Keeping it not a sweat fest.
It is conceivable that Sergeant Hakama might have missed this stipulation.
People get fucking racist over a goddamn
him as he boarded the roller coaster.
Game. Like,
Sergeant Hakama owned prosthetic limbs,
glad that that's
but was not wearing them when he boarded the ride.
All people should feel safe to play Magic the Gathering.
Readily apparent. Indeed, several ride operators noticed this, but took no action.
It's cardboard.
The report into the accident explored why this might have been the case. It was noted that ride attendants had received training that covered how to determine when a person with a disability could or could not safely ride, and how to approach a guest when they were not able to ride because of a disability. All attendants on duty were fit and well, could communicate clearly, and had passed all necessary assessments and training courses.
Jeez,
Ultimately,
Delarge.
it became apparent
scary.
that
Hi,
although
Gardevoir!
the attendants
How are you?
had passed their training,
Time
not enough had been done to reinforce it.
Mind if I do.
Over time,
Thank you,
ride
Envy, for
attendants
looking
had
out for
either
me.
forgotten what they had
Appreciate
learned
you.
or had become complacent
How
about
are you,
certain procedures,
Gardevoir?
failing to realize how important they were. Assisting a guest who was a double amputee was not something they did every day, and so their recollection and understanding of the correct thing to do was fuzzy at best, an issue compounded by the fact that they were all relatively young. The oldest ride operator was 21, an age at which they might have found it difficult to confront and evict an older disabled war veteran who was confident about riding.
Nice.
Especially when their memory of the relevant rules had not been refreshed in months or years. The ride remained closed until later in the month. By the time it reopened, several changes had been made. Signage had been made clearer, and staff had been retrained. Additionally, a new position had been created at the park. Darien Lake now employed an auditor, whose job it was to check that ride operators and other staff had not only completed their training, but that they actually remembered all of the safety-critical parts of it. Sergeant Hackemer's family took legal action against the park, ultimately settling for an undisclosed sum that would be sufficient to provide security for his two children throughout their lives. While devastated by the loss of the man they loved, family members chose to, as much as possible, celebrate his life rather than mourn his death. They noted that, when the accident took place, he had been doing what he wanted to do. The trip to Darien Lake had been a happy event for him, a return to carefree happiness after many years of difficult recovery. Speaking of the incident, his sister said, "That minute he was on that ride, he probably felt the happiest and most normal he's felt in 3.5 years.
Weird, Pineapple. You've got big Ken M energy. Do you know of Ken M? I just counted. Okay. I am so sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Nine. 10.
On the 26th of February, 1919, the Grand Canyon in Arizona officially became the 15th national park of the United States of America.
Oh boy, this is gonna be fun.
The canyon,
am I getting
actually
into something
a gorge of the Colorado River, and the many tributary canyons which surround it are mostly comprised of extremely rugged and sheer terrain.
I don't know,
areas along the north and south rim have been maintained and cultivated for the purposes of tourism.
I'll see if I can.
Dangers abound within the canyon itself, but even from well-maintained tourist areas on the rim, it is surprisingly common for people to fall to their death, often in ways that completely defy belief. National parks in America are protected areas of wilderness, selected for their natural beauty,
I can't do anything about the emote ones. I'm so sorry.
And the abundant opportunities for hiking, exploring, and other recreation.
I can't do anything about it. I am so sorry.
The Grand Canyon National Park is among the most popular, and is indeed considered to be one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. Millions of people visit the Grand Canyon National Park each year, most of them without incident. They come to see the mind-bendingly vast gorge itself, to hike some of the many trails within it, to observe ancient rock art and geological formations, and sometimes to enjoy river rafting or helicopter flights over the canyon. To a casual visitor, the idea that someone might fall from the rim into the canyon itself can seem absurd. The gorge is so vast, so unmissable, and so obviously hazardous that it seems only logical that it should inspire caution in all those who venture close to it. And yet records exist of more than 50 falls, the majority fatal, over the course of the national park's existence. Most of these falls occurred not in remote areas off the beaten path, but instead at popular, busy viewing areas. Specifically because of the high number of visitors, many of the most popular sightseeing areas have been fitted with railings or walls, as well as highly visible signs warning tourists to stay on the trails and away from the edge. To further mitigate the danger, every visitor to the national park is given either a pamphlet or a verbal warning describing the most prominent risks to life. Rangers patrol on a regular basis, speaking to visitors whenever they can to curtail any dangerous behaviour. And yet still, despite all of this, falls do occur. 3 causes predominate when it comes to falls from the rim. First and foremost, people tend to fall when trying to take, or pose for, striking photographs. While death in pursuit of a selfie might seem like a relatively modern phenomenon, the first fall of this kind
if you go back in time
with
any necessary blueprints proof and successfully take credit payment for any invention, what would it be and
of
why?
March 1925, 40-year-old Lewis W. Thompson was attempting to take a picture of himself standing on the rim of the canyon. While
how much
stepping
does
to one
it change
side
history?
To better frame his picture, he lost his footing.
Because I wouldn't want to deprive
to
the people before me of good things.
Dozens of other tourists have also
but also I want
away
to be able to live my life
photograph.
here in this time.
Among them is 20-year-old John Eric.
You'd probably do the toilet. Yo, the first thing that came to mind for me was the bidet. We're the potty sisters.
Astrick was attempting to take a photo not of the canyon, but of the Bright Angel Lodge Hotel on the south rim. Seeking a better angle, he clambered over a guardrail and, with his camera viewfinder glued to his eye, walked backwards towards the lip of the
Pineapple
abyss.
Legit, if you haven't looked into Ken M, you definitely should. You give me big Ken M energy, like in a big way.
Almost 2 decades later, on the 19th of August 1999,
the frillies on toothpicks, it's so inconsequential but made so much money.
South rim. He wanted a souvenir photo and, being alone, asked some fellow tourists if they would help him take one. They readily agreed.
The invention happens is it would have people just think you came up with it.
He then clambered over the guardrail.
Okay, I like the bidet. I like the bidet because I would like to be remembered as being kind to buttholes.
And fell into the void.
Not
knowing what else to do, the tourist with his camera used it to take several photographs of Comerford's final moments. Not the souvenir he would have wanted.
Those shaped rubber band bracelets. Oh,
many other people
those were
have also
sick.
Fallen victim to the
what
desire
were those
for the perfect picture on the edge
Where is
of the
Ken
Grand
M to be
Canyon.
found? There's a subreddit
Despite
dedicated
this,
to him.
It is interesting to note that on
ruining people's
any
lives
visit
by
to the
stealing
Grand
their
Canyon National
inventions.
Park,
Shake my head, shake my head.
Many visitors can be seen in almost any popular viewing area, traveling beyond the railings, clambering onto precarious ledges, or taking other incredible risks in order to pose for pictures.
Those things were legit.
The second common cause of falls from the rim is more nebulous, but relates to the sheer scale of the canyon. Numerous reports exist of visitors being overcome with dizziness or a sense of vertigo when sitting on the canyon edge. One striking incident of this type took place on the 9th of March, 1989. 34-year-old tourist Gisela Elixman took a seat on the very edge of the canyon at Mojave Point on the south rim.
Why would you
enjoyed
do that?
A spectacular view. When she tried to stand and move away from the edge, however, she was overcome with dizziness and fell to her death. Just 3 days later, the same thing happened again.
Is there like a natural gas event there or
Yuri
something?
Nagata was visiting the West Rim's second trail view overlook as part of a group tour. As they arrived at the viewing area, the tour group leader addressed the group, telling them of the terrible incident involving Elixman. Nagata dutifully listened to this cautionary tale, and then immediately walked to the railing, crossed it, and took a seat on the rim of the canyon. When one of her friends asked her to stand and pose for a picture, she, just like Elixman, lost her balance and fell into the void. While 2 identical incidents taking place so close together is rare, The story echoes throughout the history of the canyon. Before Nagata and Elixir, there was 21-year-old Elizabeth Hazelhurst, who, in 1971, sat on the rim of the canyon with friends and fatally lost her balance when she tried to stand. Before her, there was 17-year-old Herbert E. Kolb, who, in 1947, died in exactly the same manner after watching the sunset from the rim with his girlfriend. In each case, the victim took what they perceived to be a small risk. They sat on the edge of the canyon to take in
That's
the
true,
view,
Kool-Aid, but you would be
very
really
last view
fucking over
they would
one
ever
person,
see.
though.
Thirdly and finally, a small but significant number of falls have been caused by, quite simply, the desire to show off.
Didn't hear a time limitation.
On the 28th of November, 1992,
could I just undo
38-year-old
an invention?
Greg
Could I just
Gingrich
undo
was
guns?
visiting the park with his family. The group were hiking along the south rim when Gingrich saw an opportunity to play a practical joke on his teenage daughter. He planned to clamber up onto the low stone wall that separated the path from the canyon edge, then pretend to lose his balance and tumble off towards the void. He would then hop down onto a ledge on the other side of the wall and hunker there for a moment or two, just long enough to give his daughter a fright.
Take that.
Before popping back up.
That's for
revealing himself
remind me that I can't
unarmed.
say baby and sound cool at the same
His
time the
prank
other
didn't
day,
go to
Kool-Aid.
plan. The moment Gingrich landed on the ledge, he lost his footing and toppled over into the canyon proper. He dropped without making a sound, perhaps too shocked by his fatal miscalculation to even cry out as he fell. The target of his practical joke, his teenage daughter, was used to her father playing tricks on her. Unaware that he had actually fallen, she carried on up the path, expecting him to follow as soon as he saw that his joke hadn't landed. She had walked all the way to the car park and met up with the rest of their group before she realised that anything was truly amiss. It would be past nightfall before a search and rescue team would find Gingrich's body and fully confirm that his final prank really had gone too far. Similarly, showing off may have been a factor in another death on the 8th of September, 1993. 51-year-old James Merriman was a Flagstaff resident who periodically rode his bicycle out to the Grand Canyon in order to crawl through the railings at popular tourist spots and gather coins from ledges, where tourists would throw them for good luck. Merriman would often camp in the canyon during these coin-collecting expeditions, and was known to park rangers. Indeed, just a week before, they had been called to rescue him when he got into difficulty and became stuck on a ledge while gathering coins. This incident, it appears, did not deter Merriman from his money-making scheme. On the 8th of September, he visited Mather Point on the south rim.
My family, my wife.
Having clambered out past the railing and gathered some coins, he found that he had
at my party, and now I have no friends and family because of you, Josh Allen. You
confident in his abilities, Merriman began jumping back and forth between two rocks, inviting the watching crowd to take his picture. His final words were simply, "Watch me." No sooner had he uttered them than he lost his footing and plunged to his death. Again, these are just a few incidents from a catalogue of many. Numerous unfortunate souls, the vast majority young and male, have suffered fatal falls while demonstrating their nerve and sure-footedness on the edge of one of the largest chasms on Earth. While it may seem improbable that anyone should fall into the Grand Canyon when the danger posed by it is so evident, it can and does happen. It is easy to decry the victims of these incidents as foolish, and to lament their lack of sense, but it is also important to remember that their lives were cut short by a simple lapse of judgment, a momentary misunderstanding or failure to appreciate the danger before them. In each case, it was a brief and terrible miscalculation, made in a matter of seconds, the consequences of which consumed the entire rest of their lives.
Okay, I miscounted on the previous row. At some point. Hopefully that doesn't come back to bite us. Watch me plummet to death. They're so stupid. Oh my god. Oh no! Oh no! We don't have permission for this. Okay. What time is it? Oh, it's definitely time for another break. Everybody hang tight. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Yeah, we'll be back shortly. Don't go anywhere. All right, howdy y'all. How we doing? Sorry about the extended break there. I am going to find, excuse me, another playlist here. One that's shorter. I love the idea of doing... Let's do the nuclear horror stories. Wait, sorry. We're going to do, instead of the nuclear horror stories, we're going to do accidents on the railways because it's more thematic. But tomorrow maybe we'll do the nuclear horror stories. Give me a second. I would love to see 4 readies in chat. I would love that. Doxy, wait. What's up? What can I do for you? I have to like look at it and stuff. How long is it and things like that? Like when you put stuff in the thing, it's not a guarantee that I'm gonna cover it, but I'm sorry. I promise that I'll take a look at it. I promise that I will, but it's definitely not getting shown on stream tonight. I'm so sorry. Please don't hate me. It's just I gotta keep the same standards for everybody. You know what I mean? Because it's Disney. Also, that's a little bit scary considering Disney literally owns my ass. Hello, Emily R. I'm so sorry. Hi. It's Delarge? Okay. Welcome. All right. It looks like we have everybody ready. Because it's Disney, I made a joke. Okay. I hope that you can understand that I just have to be like careful about stuff. We're going to go ahead and do this one. And we will have time for a few others too. All right.
On the 6th of July, 2013, in the early hours of the morning, a freight train which had been parked for the night on the railway tracks near Nantes in Quebec started to move.
Sorry,
Slowly
everyone.
at first, and then with greater and greater speed, it began to roll downhill towards the nearby town of Lac Mégantic. The train consisted of 72 tanker
You guys
cars,
are so goofy.
each one bearing a full load of crude oil. With nobody on board and nothing to stop it, the train barreled towards the sleeping town, which was about to experience one of the worst rail disasters in Canadian history. Lac Mégantic was founded in 1884, and even during its very first years, the railway was a crucial part of its economy. The town was situated at the point where 2 different railroads, that of the Canadian Pacific Railway Company and the Quebec Central Railway Company, met on their route across the continent.
I am interested in getting into Vampire the Masquerade, but
I
don't cover games on the channel anymore.
As part of a campaign to champion the railways. In the town's more recent history,
if I
the railway
command,
is
could
no
I dare you
less
to do a
significant.
subathon or try VTubing? Well, VTubing is expensive. I wouldn't be able to just VTube out of nowhere.
And carrying away the finished products they manufacture, products like furniture and particle board. The town is also a hub. I mean,
it's supposed to be like small dares
all over the country to enjoy the vast and beautiful.
I can make
Lake
the model
Mégantic, from which the town gets its name.
If you get a model together,
a freight train was making its way east across Canada, traveling from
if you
Newtown
get the
in North
model
Dakota
together,
to an oil refinery in St. John, New Brunswick. The train consisted of 72 tanker
I feel
cars
like
loaded with 113,000
I'm scared to say yes to that because I don't want to just turn into a VTuber if all of a sudden everybody redeems command. You know what I mean?
The power necessary to drive it.
But I think that is a fun and creative and silly thing that we're like all about
here. The lone engineer on board, a man named Tom Harding, was
if you can get the hands to follow Doxy's hands while crocheting, I would probably just put it over the face part. Hey,
in the morning to continue its journey. He might have been glad to leave the train, as it had been experiencing technical difficulties for much of its route. The lead locomotive was spewing excessive amounts of smoke.
10.
Before leaving the train, Mr. Harding had to make it secure. To do this, he applied multiple handbrakes on all 5 locomotives, and checked that they were sufficient to hold the train in place. An important step given that
I
it was
just mean I don't want
like
every day somebody to be like, do a
this
VTubing
done,
stream.
He contacted his
you know
employers,
what I mean?
the Montreal, Maine and Atlantic Railway. He told them about the excess smoke, and after some discussion they agreed to leave the train where it was and deal with the problem in the morning. Mr. Harding left the site in a taxi, bound for the hotel in Lac-Mégantic, where he usually stayed.
I will have to think about that.
Before the next morning could come, a small fire broke out in the smokestack of one of the locomotives. Although the cause was not known at the time, it was later revealed that the fire and the excess smoke
I swore off
Dead
by Daylight,
were down to
Lil.
a bad repair job that had been done
I don't
on
do
an
video
engine
games
several
on
months before, a repair
channel
which had
anymore.
now finally
on the channel
failed.
at all anymore.
Passing motorists on a nearby road saw the flames and called the fire service. They arrived on scene and
I feel like I'm just being like, no, I'm no fun anymore. I seriously feel like that.
With this done, the flames were promptly put out. Firefighters then called the MMA Railway and advised them of what had happened and what had been done. MMA maintenance workers came out to the train and confirmed that it was safe before everyone left the scene. It was around midnight on the 6th of July. The train was stationary on the tracks, the locomotives switched off, and the fire extinguished.
I just called you Clara instead of
Clara. To a casual observer,
like an asshole.
It would have seemed that nothing at all was wrong. But in actual fact, all was not well. The train was being held in place by two types of brake. A handbrake which physically secured a brake shoe against the wheels, and an air brake which used air pressure to do the same thing. Now that the locomotives were switched off, the compressors which provided the air for the air brakes were also switched off. Air was leaking from the system and not being replaced. Slowly, the pressure in the air brake system dropped until it was no longer sufficient to hold the train in place. Several minutes after the last firefighter left the scene, the massive train began rolling downhill. With nobody at the controls, the train gathered more and more speed with each passing minute. It blasted through level crossings, leaving drivers puzzled by the speed of the train, as well as the lack of engine noise or lights. By the time it reached the town of Lac-Mégantic, it was travelling at around 105 kilometres, or 65 miles, per hour. Far too fast for the section of track which passed through the town. It approached at breakneck speed with no lights and no warning except for the sparks and smoke which spewed from its wheels.
That's really scary.
Near a level crossing close to the town's main street, the train derailed.
I've always really loved living near train
into
tracks.
One another in a chaotic jumble, spilling volatile
just because,
crude oil. This formed a burning river which swept through the downtown area.
I want to say like full 26 years of my life.
To a tsunami of fire.
Literally everywhere that I lived was really close to train
with
tracks.
Some even leaping from windows to make their escape.
Aside from one year.
But in many cases, the flames
when I was in like 5th grade, when we lived in this little apartment while my mom was going back to school.
Streets engulfed in fire, and sewers and basements flooded with burning oil.
It's just a comforting
sound to me. One of the worst hit locations in Lac-Mégantic was a popular bar known as the Musée Café. The building, which was still packed with patrons at the time of the disaster, was completely consumed.
Oh my god, I 1,000,000% switch back and forth between caramel and caramel.
Mistaking the sound for an earthquake,
I
within the building rather than running. They did not survive. The emergency response began almost immediately, with more than 100 firefighters flocking to the scene. They were presented with an incredibly complex task. Rarely had any of them faced a fire that had quite so much fuel at its disposal, and, being liquid, this fuel spread in unexpected ways, flowing down into drains and erupting into basements or cellars several streets away. Despite a confusing and dangerous situation, rescuers coordinated extremely well.
I say soda, Raikudo. Pop is what you do to a zip.
Then used foam
Fountain
to
drink
tackle
is
the flames.
just too many syllables.
Water was used to douse tanker cars that had not yet exploded.
Soda supremacy.
Among the people working across the vast area of the disaster was Mr. Harding, the engineer who had left the train on the tracks in the first instance.
you're the best. It makes me happy to see
He had seen the flames consuming the downtown area from his hotel, and had called his bosses to tell them what was going on. It had come as a terrible surprise to him to find out that it was his train that had rolled down into the town and caused this devastation. Leaving his hotel, he joined a small group consisting of firefighters and workers from local industries, who used heavy loading equipment from the factories where they worked to move the few tankers and locomotives that were still on the rails away from the fire, preventing further devastation. Meanwhile, the local hospital was put on high alert, but ultimately received very few casualties.
Yeah, Dusk Shadow Fox.
Few of the injuries caused by the disaster had been
but consider
in any way survivable.
It's true.
All in all,
I do say that just for
47
fun
people were killed in the disaster, which also destroyed more than 30 buildings, displaced thousands of residents and hundreds of businesses, and all but leveled a huge part of Lac Megantic. The flames took 2 days to extinguish. Once they were finally out, an investigation was launched. It was found that many factors had contributed to the disaster. Prominently, Mr. Harding, the train engineer, had failed to apply enough handbrakes before leaving the train. He had used 7 handbrakes, but should have applied more than twice that number for a train of that size and weight.
Hi, Humanoid Void. How are you?
He had made another error by testing the brakes while both the handbrakes and the air brakes were applied. He should have switched off the air brakes for the test to ensure that the train could be held in place by the action of the handbrakes alone. 3 men, including Mr. Harding and 2 other railway employees, were put on trial.
RC doesn't suck. I kind of like RC.
Causing death.
Spoiling my
While
cats,
there was considerable public anger about the disaster, most of it was not directed at these individuals, but instead was saved for the MMA railway. It emerged that the company had provided minimal training, had ignored complaints about the safety of its track, had used outdated tankers, cut corners on repairs, and in many other ways demonstrated
Can I please have a wild cherry Pepsi Max?
Over the course of many
Thank you.
years. Given these factors, all 3 men were eventually acquitted. Legal proceedings began against the MMA Railway, which subsequently announced bankruptcy and laid off most of its employees. Outside of the MMA Railway, many changes in procedure were brought in by railways across Canada and the US. Stricter rules to cover how trains must be left if left overnight, how they must be maintained, and to determine which trains and which routes can accommodate dangerous or flammable substances. Most railway companies now require at least 2 engineers on a train carrying dangerous materials, and insist on a stringent series of safeguards whenever a train of this type is left overnight on the tracks. To this day, the damage to Lac Megantic is still visible. A huge part of the town has been lost, including the beloved Music Cafe bar, the local library, and several other civic buildings.
Cherry Pepsi does rule.
Some have been
I like Cherry Pepsi better than Cherry Coke. I like Coke Zero better than Pepsi Max. The downtown area
that was the epicenter of the disaster remains relatively desolate. Trains
I grew up on
to run
Pepsi,
on the tracks which brought disaster to the town. Although, at the request of residents, for at least one day most years, the 6th of July, no trains run through town, as a mark of respect for a community mourning its dead.
That was a beautiful little town that he was showing photos of. I wonder if it was the actual town. Well, I mean, like, obviously some of them were, right?
On the 24th of December, 1953, a passenger express train was making its way across New Zealand from Wellington to Auckland. On board were hundreds of passengers heading home for Christmas. Many of them would not make it to their destination. Unbeknownst to anyone on board, the train was speeding towards the worst rail disaster New Zealand had ever seen. Events leading to the Tangawai disaster actually began almost a decade before, in 1945. It was in March of this year that Mount Ruapehu on New Zealand's North Island began erupting, and kept on erupting on and off for the rest of the year. This volcanic activity damaged crops, polluted water sources, and filled the air with ash and dust all across the North Island. Residents were no doubt happy when the volcano stopped erupting at the end of 1945. As it normally did between eruptions, the crater of Mount Ruapehu filled with water. Normally, water from this lake would flow from the crater and down the slopes of the volcano as part of the Wongaehu River. However, the eruption had ejected enough material to form a dam across the outlet of the lake, trapping a huge amount of water in the crater.
Sorry.
This water remained in place.
I heard my country. Am I famous yet? You're famous to me.
On year, until the 24th of December, 1953.
Allergic to cherries?
When the dam of volcanic material finally disintegrated.
That's unfortunate.
Water flooded out, creating a lahar. A lahar is a fast-moving flow of water, ash, earth, and volcanic material that streams downhill like a liquid landslide, gathering further debris as it does so. This lahar was particularly violent, uprooting trees and eroding the banks as it rushed along the course of the Wongaehu River. Spanning the river some distance downstream was the Tangiwai Bridge. This railway bridge, built in 1908, was supported by a number of solid concrete piers. The lahar slammed into these full force, completely washing away 2 of the supports. To give some idea of the destructive power of the lahar, just a single one of these piers weighed more than 100,000 kilograms, or more than 200,000 pounds.
Jesus.
The flow of water, ice, and other debris was strong enough to not only displace them, but to carry them a significant distance downstream.
That is
with the supports beneath
fucking
it gone,
crazy. That's a lot of power.
Dramatically, barely remaining.
What a lighthearted name for something so dangerous. You're not wrong.
At this time, a man named Cyril Ellis was driving his wife.
That dude is mega handsome. Do you know who that looks like? That looks like Bryce McQuaid.
Together. He arrived at the road bridge, which sat
Does anybody here watch Bryce?
Crossing at around 10:15 p.m.
He's an old friend of mine.
Submerged. Worse still,
we used
the
to game
railway
together a
bridge
lot.
Looked on the verge of collapse. No sooner had he exited the car to investigate than he heard the sound of an approaching express train and saw its lights in the distance. Realizing the danger, Mr. Ellis grabbed a flashlight.
Omega Theta, welcome. Everybody join me in welcoming Omega Theta.
And shouting in an attempt to warn
most ludicrously powerful things have innocuous names in my experience. Do you have fun examples?
Upon seeing Mr. Ellis waving frantically up ahead, he applied the emergency brakes, bringing the train to a screeching halt. Unfortunately,
it didn't undo it. Oh God!
Quite soon enough.
My comedic
it ran
timing.
Out onto the unsupported bridge, which gave way beneath it. The engine and 5 carriages tumbled down into the swollen river below. A 6th carriage teetered on the brink, prevented from falling only by its coupling to the car behind it. Mr. Ellis, who had witnessed the entire disaster from the bank, took his life in his hands and boarded this carriage, where he met the train's guard.
I think he looks a lot like Bryce.
Before they could evacuate any of the passengers, however, the coupling holding the 6th car in place snapped, and this car too plunged down into the river. Despite this 15-meter or 50-foot fall,
like
Mr.
not
Ellis
exactly
and the train
like Bryce,
guard
but like
were
they
able
could
to
be
smash
related,
a window
you know?
and evacuate passengers onto the roof of the car, from which they were subsequently rescued. Thanks to their actions,
not specifically, but I infer it as the system I work with are named Raid and Turret and Brake
by fallen luggage. The other cars which fell into the river saw much higher death tolls. While some passengers were able to escape, many were not. A huge number drowned when
Good night,
water
Clara.
flooded
Have a
into
good
their
one.
train carriage,
Thanks for hanging out.
while those who were able to escape through a door or window risked being swept away by the fast-moving water. Fast-moving water which was not only ice-cold, but which was also churned into a muddy, sulfuric slurry by the
That
lahar,
is so
polluted
scary.
with oil from the train, and filled with deadly debris that had been picked up by the flood. The 5 carriages which fell into the Wongaehu River contained 176 passengers. Only 28 of them survived. Also taking into account the lone fatality from the 6th car, and engineer Charles Parker and his fellow driver, both of whom perished in the incident, 151 people were killed, most of them in the first few minutes after the collapse of the bridge. While rescuers attended the scene, their work quickly became more about recovering bodies than about saving lives.
I think he looks like Bryce. I think that the eyes are the right shape. I think that the mouth is like it just his brows, his eyes, and his like features. Like his skull shape isn't exactly the same as Bryce's, but like his features look a lot like Bryce's.
Where they had washed up on the banks of the river.
He also,
For
it
weeks,
looks like, happened
nets were
to
put
be a
in
blonde
place across
boy,
the
but
mouth of
that
the Wonga
is
Ahu
very
in the
little
hope
to
of
do with
catching
it.
bodies that had not yet been found. Despite all this, 20 bodies were never retrieved. It is believed that they were washed out to sea.
I'm saying he does look
While
like
the search for
Bryce.
bodies
You're
was
being
ongoing,
like so
New
pushy.
Zealand was struggling to cope with the shock of the disaster.
Oh, Clara.
Most New Zealanders learned about it by means of a
You're
broadcast on Christmas
so
Day.
sweet.
The
Sherry
announcement
Pepsi
cast
Max
a
is
dark
not
pall
available
over a day
near
of
me.
celebration, with many families plunged into mourning. New Zealand at the time had a population of just a few million. The death of more than 100 people in one incident meant that almost everybody knew somebody who was in some way affected. An investigation was conducted and the design of the bridge was called into question. The crossing had been designed specifically to resist flooding and the impact of lahars, but it had been built in 1908, based on what was known then about the size and power of lahars that
yeah,
were
I'm not going
likely
to just
impact
derail
it.
the whole stream.
The lahar that had destroyed the bridge had been many orders of magnitude more powerful and destructive than had been anticipated back then. Ultimately, nobody was found to be responsible for the disaster. Everyone involved, it was ruled, had exercised due care and attention in carrying out their duties. Indeed, many people had shown immense courage and were recognised for doing so. Cyril Ellis, the bystander who had entered the train and helped rescue passengers, was, for example, awarded the George Medal the following year. The lahar had been a natural disaster, one that came at precisely the wrong time. Had it struck the bridge just a little earlier, or just a little later, there is a reasonable chance that disaster could have been averted. It was a matter of chance and bad fortune that the incident had been as deadly as it was. A memorial to those who lost their lives in the incident was put in place a few years after the disaster, in 1957, close to the place where it happened. It is maintained.
That is a really beautiful monument.
The Tangiwai Bridge was replaced with a
stronger
and more modern railway crossing.
Does not like to slip over my fingers, so it's really hard to maintain tension in the way that I like to.
Upstream from the bridge.
It's
by monitoring the water levels in the river.
Like I like to wrap around my pinky and then come up over my index finger.
45 minutes warning of any impending lahar. This system has already
because you can use this method for both knitting and
a lahar
for
of a similar
crochet.
Scale to the one which destroyed the Tangiwai Bridge in 1953.
I mean, you can use whatever is comfortable for
Trains
you
were stopped and
for both of them.
halted until
but
the powerful
for the
flood
way
had cleared
that
the bridge.
I work, I guess this is the most
Nobody was hurt.
beneficial for
Nobody
me
was
for
killed.
knitting.
In
And it also works really nicely for crochet most of the time, but this specific
lessons were
yarn,
still learned and systems were created to ensure that when the bridge was rebuilt, it was rebuilt safer and more secure than the one
She likes it wrapped around her little finger. I didn't even consider that. That, I did not know that, Raikudo. I can see that though. Like, I mean,
Wallace Circus was on its way to
I haven't like confirmed that obviously because you have been talking to me and you said it literally one fucking second ago.
Performers were on board one of the circus's two dedicated
That's
trains
cool, and I could see that being like
the
case. This video sounds like it will be a
the
bit
vast majority of passengers were
oh no,
unaware entirely that another train was bearing down on them at full speed,
thought
and that
he
in
said
just
underwear?
a few minutes, the Hagenbach Wallace Circus would suffer one of the worst tragedies it would ever endure. The Wallace Circus was founded in 1882 by Ben E. Wallace, a horse trader based in Indiana. In its early years, it was first and foremost a travelling horse show.
Yeah, that's
with
crazy.
A few exotic animals thrown in to bring in the crowds. As time went on, though, the show developed, acquiring a huge and varied animal menagerie,
to wiki things
alongside
for
a
me.
company of acrobats and performers.
So close. I feel like it's pretty well the same, right, Kudo? I feel like you were right.
Eventually became one of the grandest
like,
spectacles
I would not
in the
take marks away from you if I was grading a test. You know what I mean? Like fiber crafts. That's where it came from. You know what I mean?
10 acres.
Yeah, exactly what Kool-Aid said. I'd have just given it to you.
In 1907, the already massive circus would grow still bigger when Wallace purchased wholesale the Carl Hagenbach Circus, combining the two into the Hagenbach-Wallace Circus. This new show was of such an unwieldy size that it was forced to travel the country aboard 2 separate trains, each laden with performers, animals, equipment, circus tents, and more. Any operation of such impressive scale was bound to experience a few incidents here and there, and indeed, the Hagenbach-Wallace Circus weathered more than its fair share of disaster over the years. Minor train crashes, accidents on the road, and a season of severe floods all took their toll on the circus family, but it soldiered on nonetheless. On the evening of the 21st of June, 1918, the show had just concluded a successful run in Michigan City and was on its way to its next stop in Hammond, Indiana. One train was well underway, and the next was following along, albeit slowly. It was a fact of life that the circus trains were slow. They were antique stock, built in the late 1800s. Though they'd been renovated several times, they were still made mostly of wood, in contrast to the predominantly steel rolling stock that had become common on the rails by 1918. Their outdated construction was still perfectly legal, but meant that they were limited to a speed no greater than 40 kilometers or 25 miles per hour. This steady pace was not a problem for most of those on board. A collection of more than 300 labourers and circus performers were housed in bunks and cabins throughout the train, and the vast majority of them spent the journey getting some shut-eye, in preparation for another hard day of work ahead. The slow pace of the train would have made for relatively good conditions for getting some sleep. Equally though, this limited speed meant very slow progress towards their destination, progress that got even slower when brakeman Oscar Tim spotted a blazing hot axle bearing midway down the train. Through a series of signals, the engine was brought to a stop, and Tim and several others dismounted to place warning flares on the rails to ward off other trains, and then to see about repairing the overheated axle.
Sticky yarn!
Before they could do so, however, a bright light was seen approaching from behind them on the track. Another train. Brakeman Tim waved frantically, wondering why the approaching engine didn't seem to be slowing down. Surely the driver could see the signal flares. Tim sprinted down the track towards it, waving and bellowing, and at the very last moment even resorted to throwing a signal flare he was holding at the window of the driver's cabin as it passed him. The approaching train did not stop. It didn't even slow down. At full speed, it ploughed directly into the stationary circus train.
That's so sad.
The wooden construction of the circus train offered little protection for those inside. The approaching train ground through several fully occupied carriages before coming to a halt. One surviving passenger gave this surreal account of waking from sleep to the sound of the collision and then being violently ejected from the train. I woke up to the sound of splintering wood, and then suddenly I was sitting up. Then there was another crash, and another, and another. I was pounded into the corner of my berth. My scalp was split open, the whole car buckled.
I am having a really hard time keeping count tonight, you guys. I'm so sorry. I desperately need.
I felt my section rising as the engine of the troop train ploughed into it. Then I was away, up in the air, on top of the wreckage, in my shirt and drawers. I put down my head and lay still. A coat came sailing over and landed on top of me. Then everything was quiet. For those, like this survivor, who made it through the initial wreck, the danger was not over. Very quickly, a fire began.
Sure.
A blaze
yeah.
that would later be traced
I
back to
imagine.
the oil lamps which had been used for illumination.
Well, that and it was a wooden train.
Wounded and shocked, those who had been ejected from the train were now locked in a race against time to dig out their fellow survivors before the fire could consume the wreckage.
That is so fucking terrifying and sad.
And the wreck site a mess of precarious ledges and splintered wood. But the circus folk were used to danger. Clowns, labourers, strongmen, roustabouts, aerialists and others fell upon the wreck and started hauling survivors out and to safety. Slowly, fire companies and local residents arrived on scene and began to transport the injured to nearby hospitals. Morticians, too, were called to the wreck, and the dead were pulled from the ruins of the train and taken to every funeral home that was available. The sheer number of casualties was overwhelming. 86 had been killed, and a further 127 injured. So what had caused this devastating collision? Why hadn't the approaching train stopped when the driver saw the signal flares and stationary train ahead of him? Could he possibly have missed these glaringly obvious dangers? As it turned out, he had. The driver in question was engineer Alonzo Sargent, and he was driving an empty troop train. The reason why he missed the flares and didn't see the train was simple. Alonzo Sargent had, lulled by a warm cabin, a recent heavy meal, and the gentle rolling motion of the train, fallen asleep at the controls of his engine.
I would never be able
Sargent
to be an engineer
of the train
because
were both
of that.
Arrested and criminal charges were leveled against them.
So
These
easily
ultimately came
on,
to nothing.
like in cars, on
jury
trains,
led
on
to a
planes.
mistrial,
I sleep so
and both men
easily
escaped with only the guilt and shame
when I'm
of
being
having caused
like
so much devastation.
Slightly rocked like that. You know what I mean?
Needless to say, losing so many of its performers and workers was a huge blow to the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus, but it was not a final one. Other circuses around the country, hearing of the incident, sent staff and performers to fill out the show, and the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus was, quite miraculously, able to continue its run after missing just 2 scheduled shows. It is a remarkable
time to hydrate. Don't mind if I do. Thanks for looking out for me,
folk,
humanoid void.
that they were able to carry on in this fashion, even when so many of their number were injured or grieving. Indeed, though forever wounded by the trauma of the crash, the Hagenbeck Wallace Circus went on for many years, eventually being acquired by the Ringling Brothers Circus, and only giving its final performance decades later in 1936. Many of those who died in the crash near Hammond were buried in a dedicated area of Woodlawn Cemetery. Their graves were surrounded by statues of elephants, then a common part of almost every circus, with trunks lowered in a gesture of mourning.
That's really sweet.
This area of the cemetery, known as Showman's Rest, is owned to this day by the Showman's League of America, and serves as the final resting place of many travelling performers. They lie now at rest, surrounded by people from history who took the same road as they did. People who, if they found themselves in the same time and place, they might have considered family.
That's really kind of beautiful. I really hate the circus because of animal cruelty. But like there is a romance about it, hey? There's like, I don't know. It's an aesthetic. The traveling circus.
This video was made possible by sponsorship from the Great Courses Plus.
Can't fall asleep in vehicles even if I took one of prescription grade sleeping pills for insomnia. My sleeping pills most of the time work really nice from my insomnia.
Around 40,000 people gathered in the temporary town of Crush in Texas. The crowds were there to witness a unique spectacle.
My sleeping pills. I mean, obviously they won't work all the time, right? Because insomnia gonna insom, I guess.
Head first into one another at high speed.
What ones are you
train wreck
prescribed
would be
if
a once in a
you
lifetime
feel
sight for many in the crowd.
okay answering that?
And
I don't
for a
remember
small
the name
number
of
of
mine, so never
onlookers,
mind. I was gonna
the
say
very last thing
but if
they
I
would
see
ever
that it's
see.
the same as mine, I'll recognize it. Hey, this
A
circle is
deliberate
simply
train
because it
crash
has
as a publicity stunt was
per
not
capita the highest
unprecedented.
concentration of clowns of
A
any other
successful
place
crash
in
had been
any
carried
given
out in May
area.
of that
When
year
I was little, I
at
collected
Buckeye
clown
Park
stuff.
in
I always
Illinois.
liked clowns. I always thought that they were
The park
hilarious
was
and
a newly
adorable.
built leisure destination, accessible primarily by rail.
But I get it
And
though.
the
Like I
railroad
understand
wanted
why
a
people
big
don't like
stunt
them.
to promote it.
I get it. 1, 2, 3,
In an
4,
era
5.
where only modest entertainment
And
options
my mom
were
would like
available
call
to
me
most
a
people,
sad clown
the
or
prospect
whatever.
of seeing a train crash live in front of you was irresistibly alluring. Around 20,000 people turned up to watch. Whilst admission to the spectacle was free, the railroad made a sizable profit by laying on express trains to the event.
I didn't know
and
that there
charging
could
for
be
tickets.
sleeping pills that were for just grown
While
men.
the smash was nominally
That's
billed as a science
crazy.
experiment, much was done to maximize the drama.
I don't
A
even
special
dislike
elevated
clowns
track was
particularly.
installed
I just don't want to be
afford the
mistaken for
crowd
them
the
with
best
my
possible view,
incredible
and dummies
eyes.
were placed in each engine. The
I
real
like
drivers
you.
having
You're
hopped
welcome
off
here.
after getting
What do
the
you
trains
awful
underway.
women want?
What do you
Asher Cat
awful women
hosting with
want?
Buckeye
Buckeye
viewers.
Park train crash
Thank you so
went
much
off
for the
mostly
raid,
without a
Ashire
hitch.
Cat. Hi, guys. I'm
train
Doxy.
collided
I'm a
at almost
disgusting human
exactly the
being. You're going to
calculated
fucking hate
impact
me.
site, resulting in a
We
spectacular wreck.
crochet and do creepy stuff.
The crowd were thrilled and surged forward to clamber upon the
Aw,
wreckage,
thank you so
snatch
much.
souvenirs,
Foxy Gibbs,
and
thank you
pose
so much for the
photographs on top
follow.
of the mangled cars. Only one person had reason not to be ecstatic. T.P. Peck, a passenger office clerk, was hit in the leg by a flying bolt and suffered a broken bone. He was quickly carted off to hospital.
We are watching
and
sad
promptly
train
forgotten
accidents.
about
It's true. We are
as the
doing that. Oh my
railroad
god,
celebrated
Ashire
a
Cat, thank you so
successful
much.
and,
Thank
more
you.
importantly, profitable crash.
Ashy Cat Sparkler.
William George Crush,
You're
a
very
general
nice.
passenger agent with the Missouri, Kansas, Texas, or MKT
1, 2, 3,
Railroad,
4,
was
5,
almost
6,
certainly
7,
inspired
8.
by the phenomenal success of the Buckeye Park event. Having recently replaced their engines with larger models, the MKT Railroad had a surplus of smaller engines, for which they had no use. Crush put forward an idea. They should orchestrate a crash of their own, and advertise it across the state. Doing so might not
Dude's
only
last
bring in
name is
a great deal of
legitimately
revenue,
Crush.
but also raise
That's
the profile of the railroad.
So unfortunate. You did a report about this in high school, Eldana. Crazy.
And put Crush in charge of the event.
This is a lot lighter than our normal
He
content,
planned
though.
a spectacle that would follow a
Yeah,
similar pattern to the Buckeye
more
Park
deaths,
crash.
but a lot less
Again, admission would be free,
fucked up.
with the railroad profiting primarily from ticket sales for transport on board express trains to the crash site. In the lead up to the crash, the event was promoted across Texas. The doomed engines were painted in bright colours and put on show in various towns throughout the state.
I don't know what the fuck is wrong with
Advertisements
me,
were placed in
but
many
lately
papers.
I've been having
Word
smell
spread
cravings.
fast and far.
Does
So
that make
far,
sense?
In fact,
Like,
that it
I
reached
just
the
got a
ears of
smell
Thomas
craving
Edison in New
for
York,
True
who
Religion,
sent
which
one
is
of
a
his
perfume
photographers
that
to
I
document
like,
the event for posterity.
that I have a couple bottles of.
Soon enough, the crash at Crush
But
was
like,
a phenomenon.
I had smell cravings for
Anticipating
chocolate
crowds
the
of
other day.
20,000, the railroad
And I
made
keep getting
preparations
smell
to
cravings for
entertain.
flowers. Like, I really want to smell
Two
that right now.
wells were drilled
I
to
got a
provide
smell
water for
craving for
onlookers,
rubber.
and a Ringling Brothers circus tent was
It
erected to
just started
serve
like
as
a
food
couple
hall.
weeks ago
A carnival
that I've
midway
been
was put
getting
in place,
them.
along with a grandstand.
I don't
speakers'
know
podiums,
what the fuck.
a
It's so
platform for the
weird.
press,
Fucking been
and 2
on this
telegraph
earth
offices.
36 and a half dang
The
years.
site even had its own railway depot, over
Never,
which a sign was
never
erected
once
proclaiming
had a
the site
smell
fully
craving
fledged
before until just
temporary town.
now.
Naturally, it was named after its creator.
Sperry, I feel like that one got to
As well
ya.
as laying on entertainment, some time and attention
You keep
was
scented
dedicated
oils
to
around for that sort of
safety.
thing. I have kitty cats, and scented oils
It was
are like
decided that the audience should
specifically
be held
bad
back
for kitty
200
cats.
yards, about 183
Otherwise, I would
meters
too.
from the collision. The length of
Is
2
she pregnant?
football
It's
fields.
impossible that I'm pregnant.
Naturally, the press
I mean, I
would
guess
be
it's not
allowed to take up
impossible, but it's
positions
very
much closer.
unlikely. You think?
A special
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make light of it. I'm sorry. I was trying to like solidarity and like commiserate. I apologize.
Back onto the main
You're having a chocolate bunny now?
Finally, engineers for the MKT Railroad were consulted about the possibility of the boilers
I get you, Moth.
train exploding.
I definitely get you, Moth.
Should this happen, it would be disastrous.
I guess regular people would probably just call them urges.
Unlikely.
But like, I specifically have been getting these weird smell ones.
They would hold, organizers were assured.
Kappadoxy, Kappa. Okay.
On the day of the crash itself,
I'm just making sure. I just love you. I just love you, and I don't ever want to make you sad.
The MKT Railroad had laid on special express trains to bring in visitors from every
That was a
part of
particularly
Texas,
fucking infuriating case. That little
apiece.
Weasel. He like a weasel.
It was an offer that few
Weasels
could
are
resist.
cute.
And by midday,
That guy was a
the population
scumbag.
of Crush was
That guy,
approaching 40,000 people.
Doxy's
Some
got Kappa
visitors
blindness. I
arrived
totally
riding on
do,
top of
though.
the trains, as there was no more room inside the carriages.
That does happen a lot.
Onlookers
You're not wrong.
thronged the hills around the site. So intense was the interest that the crash had to be delayed
1, 2,
as the
3,
crowd
4.
pressed forward through the cordon which had been set up. Only once they had
The
been moved
dosage
back
for
to
grown
a
men
supposedly
aren't
safe
dosages usually by
distance
weight?
could the trains approach one another and shake hands by coming nose to nose and pausing for photographs.
For sleeping pills, anyway.
The engines and the cars full of railway sleepers which they pulled were then backed up along the track to their calculated starting points.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Crush himself signalled the start of the main
It might
event.
depend on the medication itself. Fair enough.
Sitting
Yeah, I'm not a
astride
doctor.
A white horse, he dropped a white hat onto the rails and then, very wisely, retreated. Drivers on board each train set them running and then jumped to safety.
Really?
The trains, now unmanned,
Holy
sped
moly,
towards one another
Pondwater.
at around 72 kilometers per hour, or 45 miles per hour.
3, 4, 5, 6.
Even if anyone involved in the crash at Crush had experienced second thoughts, there was now nothing they could do to prevent the trains from colliding.
7.
And collide they did, with enormous force.
Ugh.
Witnesses describe how the moment of impact, characterized by crashing iron and rending timber, was followed by a brief second of silence.
I forget what it's called. Yo, I think that
impulse,
the nighttime
both
Xanax
boilers
stuff
exploded
is
at
what
once,
I am prescribed for
transforming
my
what was
insomnia.
left of the trains into shrapnel, which flew directly into the crowd. A Confederate veteran present.
Walk with dignity, you giant toddler.
Punk Linux has entered the chat.
Punkle Nix, thank you so much for the raid. How are ya? Hi everybody, I'm Doxy. I am a garbage human being. Just disgusting. We do crafting with yarn here. Mostly crochet and knitting, and then we watch disturbing shit that is found on the internet. Welcome. Welcome. Thank you so much for the raid.
Or avoid being trampled.
How's your stream, bud? Kit Basher, thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate you.
The last piece of debris had landed.
Get on in
2
here.
people were dead, and dozens were injured, some severely. Should such a disaster take place today,
if y'all want to see the project that I'm working on, just go ahead and type in either tilde or exclamation point pattern in chat,
was,
and
however,
it'll show you the finished project and the pattern that we're doing.
No sooner had the initial
doing some fun trash crafting. Hey,
while the dead and injured
I relate to that.
Onlookers swarmed the wreck.
I'm sure it was dope. I really dig your aesthetic. I love that you've got
Several
this like.
People were so keen to grab something to mark the occasion.
I don't know, like clean punk thing going on. I just think that you're the neatest.
Crush was fired on the spot, but quietly rehired the next working day.
7, 8, 9, 10.
He went on
also, just so you guys know, it might be a little bit frustrating for you to watch because I have like severe ADD. It's untreated, and I lose my count very easily, and I have to count like a lot.
Out of court,
it slows us way down. And if that kind of thing, like, I definitely understand if that's too frustrating for you to watch. I definitely get it.
Although press coverage of the event was universally condemnatory, it was also extensive. Something which resulted in a
hydrate. Don't mind if I do. Thanks for looking out for me, Envy.
Yes, 2 people had died and many more had been injured.
Your cramps are getting bad.
Dangerous event.
We're gonna end kind of soon anyway, Delarge. I hope you get to feeling better. Cramps
the crash
the
at
worst.
Crash remains a unique and bizarre chapter of history. A disaster from which nothing was learned. For many years after the tragedy, railways across America continued to organize such spectacles.
Untreated
Although
ADD crafting
none ever
women,
ended
yeah, like
with the
in a
same
big way
terror
though.
and bloodshed as the
What I
crash
do.
at Crush.
15-minute break. Welcome back, Quinn, for 15 minutes.
The same degree
Probably at
of
the end of your break is when we're going to go to. I know that we just got 2 sizable raids. I apologize. But I promise that we'll find somebody fun to go to. And if you like what you see here, you can go ahead and follow. We're live every weeknight, except for I take like
by genuine experts in
about a night a week off just because
the
mental
lectures
health.
Cover everything from food and wine to economics and finance. Whatever you've always wanted to study, the Great Courses Plus is a great way to start learning.
I realize that this
I
is an
spend a
ad,
lot of
but
time
this person
researching
is kind
disasters.
enough to let us use their
I was
content,
thrilled
so we
and
watch
a little
ad
amused
reads.
when the Great Courses Plus
How many
suggested
people
this
did you
course,
throw out, Quinn?
Surviving Any Disaster. It's an extremely practical series of lectures that cover how best to prepare for disaster and what to do.
I've also
when you find
discovered
yourself
that
in a
this
range of
this
situations.
yarn sticks to my hand
I've also been working my way
a lot,
through
so it's really
survival
hard to
mentality,
maintain my attention.
which covers
So I'm
the
like really
psychological side of
proud
survival.
of how nice
Both
the
are
tension on this
excellent
project
in-depth
is. I
courses,
feel like it's
way better than trying to
immaculate,
research a topic
and
piecemeal
I
with
deserve
whatever resources you can
awards
find.
for this.
They've helped me understand a lot about how people and agencies react to disasters, and what it can be like to be.
No,
caught
I'm
up
not
in
offended. Crochet is definitely not for everybody.
If you
Like,
want to try
not
out
even
these courses,
remotely.
or see what else the Great Courses Plus has to offer, you can get a completely free trial by visiting.
Yep, just got another smell craving for pizza. That just happened. Like, what is going on with me? I just want to smell some pizza.
And you get
I'm
access
hungry
to the
right now
full
too, so I guess I would
library
eat
of
it
over
also,
11,000
but like that's
courses,
not what
with
this is
more added
about.
every
Like
month,
I just want to
and
smell
no
pizza.
limit on how many you can watch. Again, visit thegreatcoursesplus.com/fascinating horror, or click on the link in the description below
Good night,
to start
Delage.
your free trial today.
I'm not presenting, but I had a few answers highlighted, which was nice. I also disagreed with the presenter on something, so we had a good debate. I love a good debate. That's funny, I just got pizza. Can I just smell it real quick before you eat it? Do you mind? Does it have tomato sauce in specific? Because that's important to me, I guess. That's the thing. I just want to see how many videos are left in this playlist.
At around 6:49
Because if this is the last one, no matter how long it is, we'll just
on the
stick
22nd
Yeah, this is
May,
the last one.
1915,
So we'll just go for the
fully
remainder of
loaded
this whole
troop train
video.
was passing close to Gretna Green in Scotland.
Sorry, pardon. I apologize.
The
guys.
train was bound for Liverpool, where its passengers, mostly soldiers of the 7th Battalion of the Royal Scots, would be loaded onto ships and sent onwards to
Is that
Gallipoli,
true? Is my
where they
sound
expected to encounter
decent?
challenging conditions.
Good night,
fierce
Katie.
Fighting against Ottoman
Big time
forces.
love. Everybody should go follow Katie Fram on Twitter. She posts
Little did the men on board
amazing
realise,
art.
however,
She's
that the
so
vast majority
talented.
of
I
them
stan.
would never make it beyond Gretna Green. The train on which they travelled
Seems
was about
okay.
to become part of one of the worst rail disasters of all time.
Thank you, Omega Theta.
The Declaration
I
of
appreciate
War
that.
in 1914
I deserve it.
made the
I feel
movement
good
of
about
freight
that.
and troops
Thank
of
you.
paramount importance to Britain. So vital were the railways, indeed,
Like, I mean,
that the government
it's hard to be humble
immediately
when your
seized
tension is
control
this
of most
good.
of them and pressed into service every car they could get their hands on, including old rolling stock that had been given
Might just
up
need a
for
reload or
scrap
even a
in
pause.
previous years.
Pause resume fixes
New
so many
wagons were
problems
built
on Twitch
quickly
for
and
me.
cheaply to keep Britain
So Lil,
moving.
I'd give that a shot.
The flow of these wagons and the engines which pulled them was controlled by signalmen in signal boxes situated at every vital junction and crossing. By pulling levers,
And
these
if that's
men
not
could
working for you,
switch
everybody
points to
else
direct
says that
trains
it's
from
fine,
one
so
track
you might
to another,
be having
and
graphics
activate
card
signals which would instruct trains to
if
proceed,
it
wait
can't
in a
be
siding,
fixed
or
by, like-
reverse as necessary. The signal box closest to Gretna Green was the Quintin's Hill signal box.
Fuck, I just
Although
forgot my
usually
sentence in
manned
the
by
middle of
only a
saying it.
single
I
signalman,
apologize.
There were actually
Marinara is
two
so named
present
as it was
at the
intended to
time
go
of the
with
disaster.
seafood, literally of the sea, like
George
marine,
Meakin
mariner,
was the
submarine.
night
I actually
signalman.
knew that from my years at Olive
After being
Garden.
relieved by his day shift colleague,
It's still the
James
default sauce
Tinsley,
for calamari and other
he hung
fried
around
fish
in
in
the
most
box
places. Yep.
reading a newspaper,
Yep.
while
That
Tinsley
shit is
set himself up for the
marinara
day.
is just bomb.
This handover also happened later than was scheduled. Technically, Meakin should have handed over to Tinsley at 6 a.m.,
right.
but there was an informal agreement in place between day and night signalmen,
so 10 was on
whereby the
last
night
year, so
signalman on duty
we need
would
one
often work
more.
up to half an hour late, so that the day signalman that would relieve them wouldn't have to get up so early. Thus, it was actually 6:30 a.m. when Tinsley
Do you have a
arrived
P.O. box?
and
Can't
took
remember if
control
you
of
talked
the
about it before.
box.
I don't have a P.O. box.
This half-hour
I would
difference
really love
seemed
to,
of
but I
little
don't get
consequence
sent
to the
enough stuff to
signalmen
justify the
themselves,
cost of
but
one.
it would be one contributing
You know what I mean?
factor in what happened next.
I wish there was a service
Tinsley would
for
be
that. I
controlling
really do.
a relatively
'cause
simple
I
section
don't
of track.
have
It consisted
one.
of two
I'm very
lines,
sorry.
one
I
running
would love
towards
to
Carlisle,
eventually.
which
If the
was
channel
referred
keeps
to as the
growing
up
like it
line,
has been,
and one running
then
towards Glasgow,
it won't be
which was referred
entirely
to
out of
as
reach.
the down line. Each of these
But I've
lines
had
also
P.O.
had a
boxes
siding.
before, and even when I was
This would
getting
allow
like
slow trains to
300 to
pull off the
500
main track
viewers a stream,
and
I
allow
still didn't
faster
really get
express
sent
trains
that
to
much
bypass
stuff.
them
So
and
it
get
feels
underway.
a little bit like I
It
can't
was also
justify the
possible to
money
move
when I'm
trains between the
struggling
up
with
line
bills
and the
and
down
stuff.
line using a connecting section
You know what I
of track.
mean? I always get extra
the
things
time
of
of the
marinara from
disaster,
Pizza Hut.
the
Same. I
siding
get
on
like
the down
6.
line was
Like,
occupied by a
I
parked
fucking
goods train.
love Pizza Hut marinara,
A
and their
local train on
breadsticks
the
are
down
fucking
line
fire.
Needed to move aside.
I like Pizza
so
Hut
that
a
an
lot. I
express
don't
train
like
could
their
get
thin
by.
crust pizza. I think that their thin crust is
Night
garbage,
signalman
which
Meakin was
I
well aware
love
that
thin
it
crust
couldn't
pizza.
pull
I like
into
it
the
to be like
occupied
cracker
siding,
thin,
and
right?
so
Anything
instead,
that's
he
too
had
bready,
it
it's not
reverse from the
pizza
down
anymore. It's
line
like cake.
onto the up
You
line.
know, like I just can't
This
get
freed
behind
up
it.
the down line
I like
and let the
a
express
cracker
train
thin
get
crust
past,
and Pizza
but left
Pizza
that
Hut
local train
sucks.
parked on the up line.
But I do get their stuffed crust sometimes because
A
that's
train
really
consisting
yummy.
of empty coal wagons was waiting to use that up line. Meakin, still in control of the situation, sent
And
that
then
train
I always get
into
a
the
shitload
siding
of the
and
marinara
ordered it to
also.
wait there.
Lil, straight up, so good.
It was at this point that Tinsley took control of the box
I need to show
and ushered through
I
one express
love
train that was waiting
Domino's.
on the down line.
Uh,
As the down line
Domino's
was
thin
clear,
crust is
this train passed
supreme,
through without incident.
and also their
Seemingly forgetting about the
chocolate
local
lava
train
cakes are
parked on the up
actually
line,
pretty dang good.
Tinsley
I like them
signalled
with
to
a little
troop
bit
train
of
waiting to
vanilla
pass
ice
through the
cream
up
or
line
like
that
whipped
it was
cream.
clear to proceed.
It's really yummy.
This moment of absent-mindedness is all the more alarming given that Tinsley arrived for his shift that day.
You love the
riding
brand
on board
Casa
that
di
local
Mama?
train. He had only hopped off the engine.
Yeah,
minutes
Domino's
before.
lava cake. It's
Now,
so
its
good.
presence completely
Only
slipped his
remember
mind.
the garbage tier ass-tacularity they used to have. It's
The troop
definitely
train
better than it
surged
used
along
to
the
be.
upline and, with a thunderous crash, smashed into
I
the
would come
local
play
train,
that on your channel if you
sending
wanted
several
sometime,
of its
Callista,
cars spilling from the track.
or like just off stream.
Many were injured and
But I
killed
don't-
by this
I don't
collision,
wanna
but
cover
the
video games on
situation
my
was
channel at
still
all
to
anymore.
worsen.
It's a thin
Another
crust. I
express
love a
train
thin
was
crust.
already inbound on the down line.
Yeah, I
It
would
was too
love
late for the
that,
signalman to
Callista.
stop it.
I
The
love
express
Blood
train
Hunt. I think
entered
it's
the down
very
line,
fun.
ploughed into the scattered wreckage, and itself derailed. Now there were 3 trains smashed together and scattered across the tracks. Dozens
Pizza
of
Hut
people
cheese
lay
messes
dead,
up your
some
butt.
of them
That
hit
is
by the
very
express train
fair.
after having
Definitely,
evacuated the troop
I
train
have
and
poop
local
and
train.
problems with Pizza
Many
Hut
more were injured
sometimes.
or trapped in the wreckage, but
I haven't tried it yet.
still, the worst was yet
So
to
you're
come.
super fresh. I haven't played anything in a long,
The
long
rickety
time.
troop
So
train,
I'll have
pressed
to.
into service specifically for the war effort,
I'll have
was built from
to.
cheap wood and lit by gas-powered lanterns. These
Uh,
swiftly started a
derust
fire, which swept hungrily
some
through the
point.
wreckage, consuming those who had survived the collision.
You've been missing you some
Rescuers
VTM.
worked
It's
frantically
fun stuff,
to free their
man.
friends and fellow soldiers from the
I
wreck.
love Blood
but in many
Hunt. It
cases,
is
it was
just
simply
a
impossible.
fun game.
There
I
wasn't
wonder
time
if
to do
the
so before the
bugs
smoke
are
and
better.
flames reached them.
They've got to be, right?
There
It's
are
been a
many
while
stories
since
of
I've played.
impromptu amputations that were carried out
Even
on the
with the
spot
bugs,
to
though,
free
that
trapped
game was
soldiers.
just fun.
Witnesses also report that Where
like I can overlook a few bugs for
officers shot their own men
very, very
in order
fun
to
game
spare
experience.
them the pain of burning alive.
That's why we love Bethesda, hey?
Doctors and firefighters from Gretna Green soon
Since we tend to order pizza once a week, we go between Pizza Hut and Domino's, so the same place isn't constantly coming out here.
And destruction. Over 200 people had
I
died
don't think
in
that
the
you
space
should
of
feel
mere
bad about
minutes,
ordering pizza
and
once
the
a
fires
week.
which burned through the
I think that's
rage
part of the
for an
human
entire
experience.
day.
If you can afford pizza
Every
once a
single
week,
wagon,
you get pizza
apart from
once a
6 which
week.
had detached at the moment of collision
Like, that wouldn't
and
even
rolled back along
throw
the track,
off any
was
real, like,
entirely consumed,
dietary
and
plans
every
to have
ounce of
pizza
coal on
once a
board the
week.
train was burned up by the flames.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The vast majority of casualties were from those on board the troop train.
I knew it.
226 people died in the collision, and 215 of them were soldiers. These numbers are, it should be noted, approximate.
Making super
the fire
sure,
was
so sorry.
intense that some bodies could not be identified, and some were entirely cremated by the flames. Taking into account both deaths and injuries,
I need a different battle royale in my
7th
life. My
Battalion
friends got
was
me into
left
Fortnite no
utterly
building,
devastated.
and I need something new to do.
Approximately
I
half
haven't
of
played
the
the no
entire
build yet.
unit
Is
had
it
been
super
on board
fun?
the train.
This makes me think of how Randall Monroe
soldiers.
deduced the locations of Google server
Only
farms by looking at
62 of
pizza
those
delivery
arrived in
routes. That was
Liverpool
awesome.
unscathed.
He is such a cool guy. I got to have
Given the
dinner with
trauma that
him
they had endured
one time
and
when
the
I went to
depletion in their
Boston.
numbers,
Just
the
because
men were sent straight
I
back
used to
to
be a member of his
with only a
IRC
handful of
chat
ranking
like 100
officers
years
required
ago,
to board a
and he
ship
liked me.
and sail
So
for
I
the
was like,
front.
hey, I'm going to be in Boston. Do you want to get dinner? And he came out to dinner with us.
Most of the dead
and it was
had come from
really
the town
fun.
of Leith. It was said that there was not a single household in that community who did not know at least one
He
of
just
the dead.
is an interesting
This
dude.
emotional shock was
Like,
no doubt
the way
compounded by the
his
fact
brain
that
just works
so few
different from
bodies
other
could be
people's.
positively identified.
He is just a cool
The
guy.
majority of the dead was simply too badly burned. A funeral procession through Leith carried the bodies to their final resting place, Rosebank Cemetery. Thousands of soldiers and civilians lined the route in order to pay their respects to the dead, who were then interred in a mass grave. Even as the bodies were being buried, an investigation was launched.
I got brain
Its
froze
findings were
for a minute
decisive.
there.
The
Hated
fault
Fortnite
lay with
so
the
much,
two
except the
signalmen,
no building. I've
Meakin
only been
and
playing for
Tinsley.
about a week now, and I'm already at level 109
They
on the
came
battle
under
pass,
fire for the
and have at least
unofficial
30
tweaks
wins
they
under my
had made
belt.
to their
That's
shift
sick.
schedule.
When me
It
and
was
Diener
perfectly
started
common for the
playing
night signalman on
Apex
duty
at one
to
point,
work
we
half an
won a
hour late
lot, and
to
I was
save the
brand
day
new to it, and
signalman
it
from
felt
getting up
so
too
good.
early.
I really liked
certainly
Apex.
wasn't
Apex was a
officially
good
allowed.
fucking good
To
battle
avoid getting
royale.
into trouble, Meakin wrote down his notes for the extra half hour he worked on a piece
I miss
of scrap
playing
paper,
Plunk
so that
Bat with
Tinsley,
Minx and
when he
Bird.
eventually did arrive, could copy them out into the logbook in his own handwriting, making it seem as though he'd arrived at exactly the right time. Thus, when Tinsley should have been concentrating on the complex situation on the train lines, he was actually more focused on updating the logbook.
Apex seems like
to
one of the
ensure
best.
that he
I
didn't
agree.
get
It's
into trouble
definitely
for
one of the
sleeping
most
late.
polished.
This distraction might have contributed
And the
to him
culture
forgetting
around
the
it
presence of a
isn't too
train on the
terrible.
upline, the most
I
egregious
mean, like,
error
it's
which
still a
contributed
video
to the
game,
disaster.
so there's still toxic
But Tinsley
trash.
alone wasn't to blame.
That reminds me, I
During
got drunk
his
with the
shift,
guys from the
Meakin
Small Town
had
Murder
also
podcast last
neglected
year. I
to
could
place a
reach out to
safety
them for
collar
permission
on
to use
one
their
of the
content if you
signals.
think you'd want to use it.
The collar would have physically
Yes.
prevented Tinsley from giving
Yes,
an incorrect signal.
definitely.
The two men were found guilty of culpable manslaughter.
Tell them no
Meakin was
pressure, obviously.
sentenced
I'll
to
send you
18 months
a
in prison, while Tinsley was given 3
my
years
formula
with
for
hard
how I
labour.
send the emails.
Both prisoners were, however,
Or
released
do
after
you
just
know
1
them better
year.
than I do. Just
A sentence
communicate
which
how you
might
communicate. You're a
seem
good
shockingly
communicator.
light by
But
today's
then it's almost
standards.
commentary on top of commentary, so I
However,
understand.
This
If
accident
you're not
occurred
interested,
during
regardless, I'd
wartime,
love to have
when every
permission. You're
available
right,
man
though. It
was
might
needed
not
to
actually
serve
be
king
the
and
like. I
country.
would just not be able to.
The death of more than 200
Say
soldiers in a
much, I
terrible
suppose.
accident was more forgivable
1, 2,
in a context where
3, 4,
thousands
5,
were
6,
slaughtered
7,
each and
8,
every
9.
day in the trenches.
Yeah, this makes sense. Okay. Wait, no, it doesn't.
Indeed, after their release from prison, both men were
It super
re-employed
doesn't.
to work on the railways
Whatever.
and went on to have long and relatively successful careers. Meanwhile, A memorial was
The
raised to the
marker
dead by public
placement is
subscription.
typically always the same
It
based
stands
on
to this
which
day
of
in
the
Rosebank Cemetery
three
in Leith.
double crochets in
Upon
the
it are
shell
listed the names of the
is
dead.
number 10 of 10.
Those men
If
who,
that makes sense to anybody.
despite being brave enough to fight for their country,
And this one
died
doesn't make
before
sense.
even reaching
This
the
one
battleground.
isn't where it's supposed to be. Oh shit, is it over? Y'all, that's a wrap for stream tonight. I need to I need to pause this. We could definitely, if you guys are enjoying these smaller, like bite-sized stories, we can 100% do these again tomorrow. Otherwise, I will look into some other stuff. We haven't done a morbidology for a long time, and I love her. There's still so much dreading to get through. Anyway, thank you, everybody, for hanging out. Just a couple of shilly things that I need to say. So let me get huge. I would love it so much if y'all would follow me on Twitter. That would be great. It's just twitter.com/ZER0DOXY. I have a Patreon that you could go and take a look at. You get very, very little. It's just the warm fuzzies of supporting me and early access to my shop when my shop is open, which it hasn't even been open once yet. So we're hoping to finish this project and then open the shop. Real quick shout out to all of my patrons: Big Wolf Paws, Quinn Kenobi, Laura Cody, and Katie Bailey. I wish I could give you little kisses on all of your fingertips. Thank you for supporting me. And then what else is there? Join the Discord. I would love if you would join the Discord. You can submit mysteries for me to look at. You can tell me that you like my Discord. And you can chat with other Doxy Chat members, and Doxy Chat members are the best people of all time. I would love if you guys would hang tight and stick around for a big fat girthy raid. It would be so sick. Give me the first word that comes to mind in chat so that you can be nice and active and be automatically included in the raid. That would be sick. I'm going to run ads while I look for somebody fun to raid. And then I will be back tomorrow night at hopefully 8 p.m. my time, which is 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. Yeah. Y'all's the best. Bye.